their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Morning, it's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, it's day 6 of a chaotic election campaign, and Rishi Sunak is wooing pensioners to try to get back on track.
We'll ask the Government Minister, Mel Stride, if Tory MPs are working hard enough. Staff at Conservative campaign headquarters don't seem to think so.
Plus, the curious case of Wagatha Christie is back in court. We'll be speaking to a legal expert later.
It's Tuesday, the 28th of May. Rishi Sunak unveils a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut, while Labour claim backing from more than 120 business chiefs ahead of a speech from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Our correspondents are travelling around the country this morning with the parties on the campaign trail. Also ahead, Ireland, Spain and Norway officially recognise a Palestinian state. The SNP call on the UK to do the same. 30 million South Africans prepare to vote. We report from Nelson Mandela's hometown, where people are forced to drink water from muddy puddles. The Wagatha Christie case is back in court this morning. A specialist judge will decide how much Rebecca Vardy has to pay in legal costs. Morning, everybody. Day 6 of a chaotic election campaign. And the Prime Minister is trying to restore order with a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut. Labour sticking with its core message, it's time for a change. And they say more than 120 business leaders agree with them. In a moment, we'll be live with our correspondents right around the country on the campaign trail. But first, Mari has more.
The Prime Minister is trying to keep his eye on the ball, but he's struggling with his team. An internal memo has accused MPs of failing to get behind the campaign and knock on doors. Tory Minister Steve Baker was even accused of giving up after jetting off to Greece on holiday. And outgoing MP for Telford Lucy Allen was suspended from the Conservatives after backing the rival Reform candidate in her old seat. Today, Rishi Sunak will be hoping a promise to raise the tax-free pension allowance via a triple lock plus will get him back on track.
I don't think this election is a foregone conclusion. We're going to have a debate over the next few weeks, and I'm the one that's putting bold ideas on the table. I'm the one that's got a plan, and that's how we're going to deliver a secure future for everyone.
The Conservatives have accused Keir Starmer of not having the energy to campaign, branding him Sir Sleepy. Perhaps the sight of the Labour leader taking a tea break isn't the best way to rebut that charge. But he called the attack desperate.
When Rishi Sunak says everything's fine, we've turned a corner, that is so disrespectful for people who are struggling. That really means something to me, because I do know what it's like to struggle, and to see people going backwards in life through no fault of their own, that makes me angry.
And this morning, it's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves in the spotlight with a speech on the economy. More than 120 business chiefs have signed a letter backing Labour. But she's also under attack with a report claiming Labour's tax raid on private schools would force nearly half of fee-paying pupils into the state system. Keir Starmer acknowledges tough decisions will need to be made, but appealing to pensioners could give Rishi Sunak the edge over his rivals. Mari Aurora, Sky News.
Well, we have correspondents out on the campaign trail this very morning. Tamara is following Labour, Rob is with the Conservatives and Matthew is with the Lib Dems. Ladies first, what's the plan today, Tamara?
Morning, Kay, from the Labour bus. Well, Rachel Reeves is giving a speech today, and she has a spring in her step because today Labour are celebrating getting the backing of 120 business leaders who have written a letter to the Times saying it's time for a change, it's time for Labour to be given a chance, and that the economy has for too long been beset with instability, stagnation and lack of long-term focus. Now, these include figures from the world of finance, of retail, of manufacturing, and although there aren't chief executives of FTSE 100 companies in there or big household names, this represents a lot of effort by the Labour Party and Rachel Reeves courting businesses over the last few months and years. And those who follow elections closely will know that it's normally the Conservatives who get business leaders to support their campaigns. And in fact, one of the people who has signed up the letter, the founder of Iceland Supermarkets, Malcolm Walker, previously signed a letter backing the Conservatives under David Cameron in 2015. So Labour will be saying they are the party of business, and Rachel Reeves will be giving a speech at a business today saying that she wants to lead the most pro-growth Treasury in the party's history. How that squares with the party's agenda of supporting workers' rights is a question that I think will continue over the coming weeks, but certainly Labour very buoyed today by that endorsement from business leaders.
OK, let's catch up with Rob, should we? They feel that the keys to number 10 are via pensioners, it would appear.
Yeah, exactly, Kay. You join us somewhere on the M1 heading towards campaigning visits that the Prime Minister has got in his diary in the Midlands and Staffordshire and in Leicestershire today. He'll be meeting pensioners later today, in part to plug this second big new announcement from the Tories of this campaign, essentially an income tax cut for pensioners. But I think the way it's been done is pretty provocative. It's being done through essentially expanding the triple lock, that very expensive ratchet mechanism that already pushes up pensions, the basic state pension. It's gone up almost 20% over the last 2 tax years. Why it's provocative is because if you're not a pensioner, you will still see your tax allowance frozen. But for pensioners, it will start to go up at the same rate as the basic state pension. So essentially the Tories are saying it means that if you just get the basic state pension, then you will never pay income tax on that. It's clearly an appeal to the Tory base. It's clearly also very political, because expect questions to Labour about whether they would mirror this. And if they don't, expect accusations from the Tories of a Labour tax rise for pensioners. So once again, I think after that national insurance announcement, focusing very much on the traditional core Tory vote, I think there will be questions clearly about generational fairness and also how it's being paid for. By the end of the Parliament, it will cost £2.5 billion per year to fund. The Tories say that will come out of clamping down on tax avoidance and aggressive tax evasion. Clearly, that's not necessarily guaranteed revenue, though. So, yes, Rishi Sunak trying to get back on the front foot after a bumpy start to the campaign.
Are you Billy No Mates there, Rob? Did nobody want to sit next to you?
Yeah, I know.
We'll come back to it.
Well, I've got ITV next to me, but yeah.
We couldn't see anybody in the shot. Thanks very much. Thank you. Matt, you saw a glimpse of him there. He's with us now. Following the Lib Dems, you're taking a pause where you are. What's going on?
It's a similar story for Rob in the office, Kay. You should see it. But look, we're in the slightly overcast but no less beautiful Lake District this morning. It's the Lib Dems' sole seat in the north of England, if you can believe that statistic. But they are very keen, as you can imagine, to add 1 or 2 to that list over the course of this general election campaign. We're here in particular in Tim Farron's seat, and the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, will be doing something with Tim Farron later on today. One of the problems the Liberal Democrats always have in election campaigns, which inevitably are about the future Prime Minister, the Labour Party and the Tory Party, is getting themselves the airtime that they want. And so we're assured by party sources that over the course of the next few weeks, you can expect some rather eye-catching stunts and events to try and grab the eye, and we'll be with them the entire time. This particular Magical Mystery Tour takes us from the Lake District to Wales tomorrow and then back to the southwest, which is really the key part of the country for the Liberal Democrats, where they're trying to properly break into that so-called Tory blue wall on their big yellow bus, which they have aptly named Yellow Hammer.
OK, well, look forward to hearing from speeches from all three leaders a little bit later on. For now, thank you. Meantime, Israel's Prime Minister insists he won't end Israel's war in Gaza despite global outrage over the deaths of civilians in Rafah. Let's get more, should we? Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle is standing by for us. A tragic error, a tragic mistake is how the government of Israel is describing it. Alistair, good morning. What are others saying?
Yeah, the Israeli government saying it was a technical error. Benjamin Netanyahu admitting it was the Israeli military at fault, and an investigation is underway. Whether or not that will satisfy the growing number of Israeli critics around the world, we'll have to wait and see, because the condemnation yesterday from countries that have traditionally been allies of Israel, well, it was pretty strong. The French President Emmanuel Macron saying that he was outraged by the attack. The Italian government, who has, broadly speaking, over the last 8 months been backing Israel, well, they said that they would like to see a halt in operations in Rafah. And the European Union perhaps thinking what was previously thought to be unthinkable, and that is the potential for sanctions against Israel, caveated with a statement from the Foreign Policy Chief, Josep Borrell, saying that they would have to look at the relationship between Israel and the EU if Israel continued to operate in Rafah and defied that ruling at the back end of last week from the International Court of Justice ordering Israel to halt operations there. What we haven't had, I would say, a fulsome response from is the United States, because they are key in all of this, and I think they'll be trying to tread a fine line between retaining their support for Israel but also condemning what clearly was a massive loss of life, and the fact that the Americans had told the Israelis that they always opposed an operation in Rafah for this very reason.
OK, for now, Alistair, thank you. Talking about Palestine in the bulletin as well.
Yes, we certainly are. This is Scotland's First Minister calling on the UK government to immediately recognise a Palestinian state. He wants the next Prime Minister to follow Ireland, Spain and Norway, which will formally recognise Palestine as an independent state. Our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, has more details.
Chanting for the freedom of Palestine in what could be Europe's most pro-Palestinian country. Dublin Football Club Bohemians hosting the Palestinian women's team shortly before the Irish government announced today's historic recognition of their country, alongside Spain and Norway.
Some have framed our decision as a move, our decision to recognise the state of Palestine as a move to impose an outcome on the parties, or as somehow a reward for terror. Nothing could be further from the truth.
The Palestinian ambassador to Ireland says it's a momentous day for her people.
This gives hope. This gives them some light out of this dark tunnel. The normal Palestinian people see that we're seen, we're heard by Ireland, by Spain, by the whole world, actually, who protest since the 7th of October. We're not alone in this world. I mean, it's very important.
Israel's response has been one of thinly disguised fury. The country's foreign minister posted this video, Ireland rewarding terrorism. It's a view shared by a former Irish justice minister and prominent member of the Jewish community.
It's about as relevant as New Zealand tomorrow morning announcing that they now recognise that the government of the Republic of Ireland rules the entirety of the island of Ireland. Of course, that wouldn't change reality on the ground. And probably if that did happen, the Irish government would look askance and think everyone in New Zealand has gone mad.
Irish-born Jews say they fear the move could fuel anti-Semitism.
The experience has always been Céad Míle Fáilte. There was an outstretched hand for us and other people. But now we find very simply that that hand is curling into a fist, and we don't know where that is going.
The Palestinian ambassador is now urging the UK to follow Ireland's example.
The British, they have a very strong hand in the injustice that happened to the Palestinians. So I think it's important, one of those countries that should recognise the rights of the Palestinian self-determination is the British government.
The Palestinians hope more Western European nations will follow suit, but Israel sees it not as recognition of a state, but of the actions of a detested terror group.
No more! Israel is a terror state!
Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
The Metropolitan Police has launched a nationwide criminal investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It's understood that about 80 detectives are involved in the investigation. It will take into account the findings of the public inquiry when it concludes later this year, and therefore no charges are expected until at least 2026. Hundreds of sub-postmasters were wrongfully convicted after Fujitsu's faulty Horizon IT system made it appear as though money was missing at their branches. France's Transport Minister has warned that strict new EU border controls could lead to operational consequences and, I quote, civil unrest at airports. The rules will require all non-EU passport holders to have their fingerprints and photo taken when they first arrive in the bloc from October. Both the UK and France have expressed concerns over the measures, which will also apply to those travelling on the Eurostar and also ferries. Pope Francis has been accused of using an offensive term aimed at gay men. Local media are reporting that the Pope made the slur during a private meeting in which he told Italian bishops that gay men couldn't become priests. The 87-year-old pontiff had been credited with offering a more welcoming approach towards gay people.
Now, the curious case of Wagatha Christie is back in court again today. Good morning. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah, gripping stuff for those who followed this. It was a story, wasn't it, of phones overboard, leaked or lost passwords and secret sleuthing. So to remind you, ultimately it resulted in victory for Colleen Rooney and a big bucks legal bill for Rebecca Vardy. So that is what's going to be decided today, just how much she's going to pay. I'll take you back to where it all started. Colleen Rooney felt that stories about her private life were being leaked to the press, and so she came up with a plan. It was a sting operation. She basically planted fake stories on her private Instagram account. But this is the key. She changed the privacy settings so only her suspect could read those stories. And what do you know? 3 stories end up in the press. So one about a fake flood in her basement, one about heading to Mexico for a gender selection procedure. So she thinks she knows who's responsible, and it's at that point she posts it on social media, and that post goes viral. Now, Rebecca Vardy, who was the suspect, says it's not me, and decides she's going to take the case to court. She's going to sue. Sadly for her, it was decided against her. So the judge ruled that the post was substantially true. That was in July of 2022, and that it was likely that Vardy's former agent had been passing this information on to the press. So that's
She's the one that lost her phone over the North Sea in a ferry.
Yeah. It can happen. It can happen, especially when you've just been asked to hand that information over. Anyway, she's already been told she'll face 90% of Colleen Rooney's costs, and as a starter had to pay £800,000 in November of 2022. Today, before a specialist
It's a week's
posture.
wastage for a husband, though, isn't it?
Well, you know, I mean,
maybe a little bit
pennies, yeah. But anyway, she'll find out today. 10:30, it all kicks off.
OK, I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest. Do they have to turn up?
We don't know the answer to that. Everyone will be waiting, though, won't they?
Yeah, I think
That's
they
for sure.
don't have to, but they may.
Maybe
I
they
think
will.
is my
We'll
understanding.
all be watching to see what they're wearing.
Joshua Rozenberg will be with us a bit later on to talk more about it. Thank you. Now, tomorrow, South Africa will vote in its most consequential election since the end of apartheid. 30 years after Nelson Mandela led it to power, the African National Congress could lose its dominance. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra El-Boghir, travelled to the birthplace of the late South African leader and found communities suffering from poverty, hunger and no running water. From there, she sent this report.
A shrine to the man who led South Africa to freedom. A faded picture of greatness, surrounded by weeds, near the home where he was born. Nelson Mandela's hometown is not exempt from the growing inequality ravaging the country. Here, the decline of his legacy is felt the most.
That's Mandela's home, and this is literally his backyard. But the taps are running dry, the crops are withered, and his vision for towns all across the country, like his, just hasn't come to life.
And on the doorstep of Mandela's childhood home, where he's now buried, the loss is layered.
Yeah, we feel the freedom when he's was still alive. But now everything is not good at all. We are living in poverty and unemployment.
For elders, the memory of the man they know and love still holds strong, fueling a deep loyalty for his party, despite its failure to uphold promises Mandela made.
Mandela promised us houses, and to this day we have not received them. We cannot build houses because our children are unemployed. We also don't work. The welfare grant we get is only enough for food.
Nearby, a mother of two washes her children's clothes with the puddle water they're forced to drink.
We drink with cows and pigs. I don't feel happy at all because we are struggling here. Yes.
Villages across the province have no access to running water, collecting what they can from these swamp-like groundwater puddles.
It makes us sick, and my son has a rash because of it, and he always has a running stomach, always.
She's a volunteer at Itemba Kuluntu, a community charity helping families in this village survive a lack of basic services.
How long have the taps been dry?
So it's almost a decade now. This cluster of villages out here outside Port St. John's is really the most forgotten network of rural villages in the country. And this is a systemic human rights violation. This is a major issue that goes back decades, and it needs to be rectified.
It's here in his home province that poverty runs rampant, and his dream for South Africa seems the most distant, where Mandela is buried, but can never truly rest. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News, Eastern Cape.
I'm looking at this morning's front pages for you now here on The Breakfast Show on Sky News. Tuesday morning, the 6th day of this election campaign. The Telegraph reporting on the Prime Minister's pledge to never impose tax on the state pension. The Express says the proposal would hand pensioners a £100 tax cut next year by raising their personal allowance. The Financial Times says it could help shore up elderly votes for the Conservatives. The Metro reports on Sir Keir Starmer's first speech on the campaign trail, in which he talked about his tough working-class upbringing. And finally, the Mirror leaves with Starmer dismissing Rishi Sunak's national service idea as a teenage dad's army. Mel Stride is here with us this morning for the government. It's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time, as always. A busy few days, few weeks ahead for you. I'm reading this morning that Labour has won the endorsement of a coalition of business leaders who say a new outlook is needed. What does that say about you guys?
Well, it says they've got a letter together with 200 names on it. There are no names on it, I think, in the FTSE 100, some of the biggest businesses in the country. It was only back in November, Kay, that actually, when we launched the full expensing, that biggest tax cut for business in modern history, that we had 200 names, which included some of the biggest and most important businesses in the country. Look, what really matters here is, firstly, who's going to be the party that has the right plan to get the economy moving, get growth going. We've already demonstrated that inflation now has gone right back down from around 11% to more normal levels. We've got real wage.
You guys, that is it? I thought you had nothing to do with inflation.
Well, no, it's
only
very
when it
much.
Goes down.
No, it has very much does have a government component, because you have to get your
so when
spending
it goes up, it's
right.
Your fault as well.
You have to get your spending right in order to control inflation, to have what they call the right fiscal policy, so resisting pay demands and elements like that, if you're to accommodate what the Bank of England does in terms of putting interest rates up to control inflation. But my point is, we are turning a corner now, Kay. We are at an inflection point for the UK economy, and things are going to improve going forward. What we don't want to do is go back to square one with a Labour Party that has no plan.
Yeah, these 120 businesses are inconsequential.
No, I didn't say inconsequential. What I said, I did simply observe that amongst that number, there are not the kind of businesses that, for example, supported, and in fact there were 200 in our letter back in November, the biggest tax cut for business, full expensing, biggest tax cut for business in modern times.
The reason I press you on that, of course, is because the Prime Minister's wife's former childcare business investment is one of those.
Well, that may or may not be the case, but my point, well, I think the relevant point is the relevance of the letter in its totality, which is what we're discussing. And as I say, I think, you know, there are names on there, and that's fine and all well and good.
Is that not mildly embarrassing?
No, not at all. Look, I think people in this country should be allowed to invest in businesses. It's something that I think is really important. In fact, if you've got a pension, which is what I've come on to talk about,
we'll get onto that.
You're going to be benefiting from investment in businesses. That's how it works.
If you don't mind, the point is that the Prime Minister's wife's former childcare business has said, you know what, we've had enough of the Tories.
Well, look, whether the Prime Minister's wife has invested in any particular business does not detract from the things that really matter, which is that this is the government that has turned the economy around, has got growth going now in the last quarter. We're the fastest growing economy, equal fastest, in the G7. We are making huge progress. There is more to come. We're
not in the polls.
10 months. Well, the polls are where the polls are at the moment. The only poll that matters
is the one on election
July.
night.
Well, that's true, Kay. I mean, it may make you chuckle.
I've covered 12 elections. I know how it works.
There you go.
Yes.
So we've got a long way to go between.
What about Steve Baker? Does he know how it works? He's going to campaign from Greece on his holidays.
Well, look, what I know is that there are hundreds of Conservative candidates up and down the country, pounding the pavement, knocking on the doors, working for every single vote, because this election really matters. Now, I can't comment on what Steve's doing or where he is or what he's up to. He may be designing his literature, doing all sorts, maybe making telephone calls. I have no idea. But what I can tell you is that we are fighting for absolutely every vote. Now, I know we're behind in the polls, and that is why we are working so hard now to try and get across the line, because it really matters to the future of our country. And I've described the progress that we've made. We've come through a really tough time where we had COVID, where we had this high inflation because of the war in Ukraine. We have supported the economy. We spent £400 billion doing that to get us through. We are at an inflection point. We have turned the corner. And my message would be, let's not blow that to a party under Keir Starmer where we don't even know what he stands for.
And you think that...
We have a clear plan that's working.
Yeah, OK. And they don't have a plan, I know. That's what you always say. Pensioners...
Well, but we say it because it happens to be true.
Well, we'll see. They seem to have quite a few ideas
why won't he debate
up.
the Prime Minister? Why will he not come forward?
He hasn't said that he isn't going to debate the Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has asked him to debate him every week in this campaign.
Yeah, that's not the same as not debating with him. He is going to have some debates with him, just not every week.
OK, why...
A bit busy on the campaign trail,
well,
some might say.
Yeah, a bit busy trying to keep a low profile in terms of what he stands for, I think. Pensions, right. So a really big and important announcement today, which, as you know, we have something called the triple lock, which means that pensions have been going up very strongly over many years. In fact, £3,700 more for the state pension than in 2010. We want to go still further, and we will not only uprate by the triple lock across the whole of the next Parliament, but we will also uprate something called the personal allowance, which is the amount you can earn without paying income tax, by the triple lock as well. And that will mean millions of pensioners are getting a tax cut through time. Now, Labour have dismissed that.
They say
they wouldn't do it, which will drag millions of pensioners into tax who weren't paying tax before.
What happened to some pensioners having to pay income tax on their pensions? Can you guarantee that that won't happen under a Conservative government?
On the basic state pension, that is your form of income, then under our plans, we will make sure that you are covered by the personal allowance. In other words, you're in that no tax band. I'm sorry, I do have to make this point, but by 2027, if you don't do that, as Labour propose, you will see millions of pensioners paying tax for the first time, paying income tax, with all the paperwork, the red tape, all that filling in forms that goes with it.
So under the Conservatives, that won't happen?
I don't think older people want to do that.
So under the Conservatives, you won't have to pay tax on your state pension?
So under Conservatives, where your state pension, your basic state pension, is your source of income, we will make sure that the personal allowance rises in line. Correct. Goes up. Well, clearly, if you're earning hundreds of thousands of pounds, for example, elsewhere, you're going to pay tax on it. But if you're on the basic state pension and that is your income, then you will be protected from paying tax, because we will make sure that the personal tax allowance rises by the triple lock uprating, which is why we call it the triple lock plus. And it'll stop millions of pensioners, as would be the case under Labour, getting dragged into income tax.
What role is Boris Johnson going to play in this election?
I have no idea, but I know that he's a very solid, vigorous Conservative, and I would expect him to be fully supportive of a Conservative victory on July
Even if he's in Greece on a sun-lounger with Steve Baker?
I don't know what his plans are. I'm sorry. There are a lot of things I do know, Kate, and I can tell you about, but his travel plans and what he's up to.
Well, apparently he's going to be away for most of the campaign. So how effective is he going to be?
I don't know. Look, this isn't about one particular former Prime Minister. This is about...
He won the 2019 election for you.
Kate, these are big issues that we're looking at in this election. We are looking at a party that has brought us through some of the most difficult times for this country since the Second World War, has reached a turning point with the economy, has got near record levels of employment, low levels of unemployment, has got real wages growing, has got growth going.
And still people won't vote for you. What's all that about?
Well, we have some time to go to the general election. But that is why we are fighting so hard to make this point.
Is
and
it a
that's
clean
why
fight?
Keir Starmer
Is it a clean
should step
fight?
up.
Why are you calling him so
to those
sleepy?
debates
Why
and
are you
tell us
calling
what
him
he
so
really stands
sleepy?
for.
I mean, is that language that you would condone?
Sorry,
so sleepy, is that language that you would condone?
It's not a term that I have used or would use. I think whatever age you are in life, I think people have a huge amount to contribute, and some of the most effective.
It's very
people,
wise you said that. I'm the same age as Keir Starmer.
Well, exactly. Well, I'm in the same bracket, so I should declare an interest.
There we go.
But equally, what does matter is what you stand for. And at the moment, I'm sorry to come back to this point, but it's so important. We have got the economy through a tough thing. We are seeing the brighter, sunnier uplands hoving into view. And yet we have a party that, yes, has got a lead in the opinion poll, but is trying to keep as low a profile as possible, not telling us what it stands for, having no plan and expecting to just drift over the line. And that is not good enough. And that is why Keir Starmer should step up to the plate and should debate with our Prime Minister.
He is going to debate with the Prime Minister.
Every week, we should be...
He is going to debate with the Prime Minister.
Applying that scrutiny so we can actually find out what No Idea Keir is all about.
Oh, that's good.
I made that up this morning.
Yeah, very
like
good. Yeah, let's see whether it stands the test of time.
Right.
It's good to see you, as always.
See
Thanks
you.
very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Going to be talking about Israel doing enough to protect civilians in Gaza. Are they? Speaking to the former head of the British Army, General Lord Dannatt.
Breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Welcome back to the Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Coming up, going to be speaking to the head of the British Army about Gaza and the responsibility to keep civilians safe in war zones. Before that, quick thought on what we heard from the Conservatives this morning. Good morning, Mike.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. So we had Mel Stride, Work and Pension Secretary, announcing this big, triple lock plus announcement that the Conservatives really think might potentially be able to turn the tables in the polls. We know that they're trying to appeal to older voters, to pensioners. We know that older voters vote more. The concern would always be, is there too much of a generational shift to the point where nobody under a pension age will actually vote Conservative? And there's still plenty of them altogether. But nonetheless, they would say they would point to things like tax cuts, they would point to things like childcare that they've already done to show that they're helping different sections of society. The Labour Party is saying this policy is never going to happen. You can't trust the Conservatives. They break their promises all the time, and therefore they're trying to brush it off. But it could potentially cause a bit of a bump in the road for the Labour Party, I think, because at the moment they were on a level playing field with pensioners. They'd both agreed to back the triple lock. Now this is essentially kind of almost outplaying the Labour Party by saying we're going to take it a step further and do this lock plus, which the Labour Party are unlikely to do, considering that they are talking about being very, very tight with their fiscal rules, and the tax evasion money that the Tories are talking about, they've already said they're going to pledge to the NHS and to education.
Rich Jonathan Reynolds in the next hour. Interesting about debates as well.
This situation that the Conservatives want 6 debates, there's never been 6 debates. No. And calling again for more debates head-on-head, well, Nigel Farage is calling for a debate with Rishi Sunak, but the Conservatives aren't going to agree to that, surely. So it's got a little bit skewed. They're having 2, I think.
Yes.
2 debates, which is what
so
they're doing.
Potentially more.
Potentially more. Yeah. And also, Sir Sleepy, not going to say those words.
He wasn't impressed by that phraseology.
Which I think is a good... We don't need Trump in politics.
No,
and the electorate's savvy, and they'll see straight through it.
Yeah, and also I think, actually, it is dangerous when you start to get into lines where people could kind of, view that as being ageist. And actually, what's wrong with being an older person and being a politician? Many would say, actually, you're going to have more experience, more wisdom, and therefore, keep a calm head in difficult scenarios. So age is not a bad thing in politics. And to try and suggest it is, all it's going to do, you play it back to them in 5, 10 years' time, and there's another election, and then their candidate's older. It's not a good idea, really.
Certainly not. Let's bring you some of the top stories this morning, shall we? It's day 6 of the election campaign. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is promising a tax break for pensioners if his party is re-elected, as we've just been hearing. Meanwhile, the shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will make her pitch to business leaders in a speech later this morning. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says something went tragically wrong after airstrikes targeting 2 senior Hamas militants killed a reported 45 people and injured dozens more in a displacement camp in Rafah. On the day Ireland officially recognises a Palestinian state, the Scottish First Minister is calling on Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to immediately do the same. And the Metropolitan Police have launched a nationwide investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It's understood around 80 detectives are involved, but no charges are expected to be brought until 2026 at the earliest.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that something went tragically wrong after airstrikes targeting 2 senior Hamas militants killed a reported 45 people and injured dozens more. International organisations have condemned the strike. The EU insisted Israel respect an International Court of Justice ruling to halt strikes on Rafah. Let's join General Lord Richard Dannatt, former Chief of the Defence Staff. Good morning to you, my Lord. I did speak to you last October. You felt that a ground invasion was the right course of action at that time in pure military terms. What are your views now?
Well, I think one has to stick by that judgment that a ground invasion was the right course of action for Israel. Put in the context, without getting complicated about this, of what we call the just war theory. 2 questions. Was it right for Israel to fight? I think most people would say yes. But are they fighting right? And most people would probably say no. And this latest example of 45 people losing their lives, probably more than that, in Rafah is an example of it. The problem that exists here is that defenders should not, by international law, hide behind innocent civilians, use them as human shields. And of course, that's exactly how Gaza is set up at the present moment, with civilians very much forming a human shield. But on the other hand, the attacker must use proportionate proportionate weapon effects and use violence in a proportionate fashion. And these two things sit in sharp counterpoint as far as Gaza is concerned. And I'm afraid an appalling incident such as just happened is an inevitable consequence of those two parts of the circle not being squared, or vice versa.
Yeah, just looking at some of the images as we're speaking to you, we know that at least 45 civilians, we're told, died as a result of this tragic mistake, in the words of Benjamin Netanyahu. What does it say, though, about this war that Hamas can still counter by firing rockets at Tel Aviv?
Well, as you say, 8 rockets fired from Gaza into Israel does indicate that Hamas still has some capability and also determined to use it. But again, I think it comes back to the point that which we have all been discussing over the last months. So much of this war is being prosecuted from underground. Of course, the innocent civilians of Gaza live above the ground, and the enemy effectively is under the ground, which makes it tactically a very difficult challenge for the Israeli Defense Forces to get at their enemy, which is Hamas. I think any reasonable person would say the Gazan people are not their enemy, but it's the Hamas fighters, of which there would still seem to be really quite a large number around, who are the legitimate target of the Israelis. But getting at them is very difficult to do when their existence is an underground existence.
The International Court of Justice, I know that you have been following them as well. They ruled that Israel must immediately halt its push into southern Gaza. Would you expect Israel to heed that threat, that warning at this stage?
Well, frankly, Netanyahu is going to follow a policy of trying to find a polite expression for this, something or bust, frankly. He's being indicted. He is determined that Hamas will be destroyed. And I think he's going to push this one absolutely to the limit. Yes, on the other hand, he's got a lot of pressure at home from families of those who are taken hostage to do some kind of deal to get the hostages back. So in a sense, and I've got no sympathy for him at all, so I think he's brought a lot of this on himself, he is between a rock and a hard place and is quite stuck for options. So I think he is going to press and persist and try and meet his objective, which is the total destruction of Hamas. Whether he can achieve it or not in a fair and reasonable way is very much an open question.
As a military man, what is your prediction on what is going to happen over the next few days and weeks?
I think the Israelis will continue to push. I think the world will continue to scream that this is outrageous. I think Netanyahu will put his fingers in his ears and not listen to international pressure. And this will go on for quite some time. Whether there will ever be a protracted ceasefire, which could lead to Israeli hostages being released and a very large number of Palestinian prisoners being released, I don't know. These conversations and discussions have dragged on for weeks, several months now. As I said, I think Netanyahu is going to go for broke. I think he feels that he hasn't got personally many options. And I think the bad news stories, such as we've just heard, will be repeated as the Israelis press to try and destroy Hamas completely.
OK. Thank you, my lord. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Let's catch up with Wilf, should we? He's going to talk about the Shadow Chancellor's pitch to business leaders later on this morning. Hi, Wilfred. Good morning to you. What's planned?
Very good morning, Kay. Well, we're looking forward to that. As you said, the Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, due to give Labour's set-piece speech of the campaign trail today at 10 a.m. So, of course, we'll be tuned into that. It comes off the back of 121 business leaders signing a letter saying they support Labour's vision for business. We should say that it's not the biggest names in business. There's no current, say, FTSE 100 CEOs on it. But what is very clear is the lack of a similar letter from the Conservatives, which is striking. And one or two names who've signed this had backed the Conservatives in 2015 on a similar kind of pitch for business, switching sides. So a great launch pad for Rachel Reeves for her campaign event at 10 a.m. today. And what's interesting, Kay, is the fact that we know that speech is coming. Similar to yesterday, it was Sir Keir Starmer's speech. And we're pretty confident we know what's going to follow it, which is all the members of the shadow cabinet and various MPs out and about parroting the same message that comes from an organised campaign speech in the morning. Whereas yesterday from the Prime Minister, it wasn't as big a set-piece event. It was a pool interview clip, some football training with kids, and clearly disarray when it came to the messaging from his his cabinet and other MPs throughout the afternoon. So we'll see how all of that unfolds throughout the day.
We will, for now. Thank you. Still to come on the breakfast programme for you here on Sky News, the Wagatha Christie case is returning to court for another battle, this time over legal costs.
I wish I was surprised, but unfortunately I'm not. But whilst that sounds very scary, 21,000 people will be diagnosed with melanoma, I think it's important to say two things. First of all, if it's caught early, around 9 out of 10 people will survive 10 years after a melanoma diagnosis. Catching it early is key. But also, 17,000 of those 21,000 could be prevented. And whilst early treatment is brilliant and we've got more and new and interesting and innovative treatments for even late-stage melanoma, if you could avoid getting it in the first place, that would be better for everybody. But it is vital that we stay out of the sun in the hottest hours between about 11 and 3, that you wear a good high-factor SPF of at least 30, and you need to check the star rating on the back, and that star rating needs to be 4 or 5. And that means you're protected against UVA and UVB. Pop on a hat. You know, these are the things that make a difference. People who we don't necessarily put sun cream on their heads, they should do, but everybody needs to wear a hat. So sun protection is key, and avoiding sunbeds. People often worry, and they worry, for example, about, oh, if I put on sun cream, I'm not going to get enough vitamin D. And research from Australia shows very clearly that we don't put on enough sun cream and we don't reapply it often enough. People are definitely getting their vitamin D. You need to be using about 2 fingers worth on just your face and neck, 2 fingers worth on your arms, 2 fingers worth on your upper legs, 2 fingers worth on your lower legs. And actually that's about a shot glass of cream to cover your whole body every couple of hours. And if you're in the water, as soon as you get out of the water as well. There are 3 kinds of skin cancer, and melanoma is the kind that comes from moles. And we use the ABCDE rule. So A stands for asymmetry. Generally, moles are broadly symmetrical. You could fold the 2 halves together. And if it looks like one bit is growing off in a different direction, it's not symmetrical anymore. That's something to see your doctor about. The borders should be nice and smooth. That's the B. If one becomes a little bit raggedy, go to the doctor. C is for colour, that you need to have less than 2 colours. And if you do have 2 colours, that again, that they're symmetrical. D, if it's under about 6 millimetres, then we tend not to worry. And E, and here's the most important one, evolving. If your mole is changing, get it checked. And with regards to the other kind of skin cancers, if you have a sore or a scaly patch or a lesion that is different and isn't getting better, go and get that checked out.
Again, everybody, you're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News, Tuesday morning, right in the middle of an election campaign. But if you go to the High Court, they're talking about something different, wrapping up the loose ends of what came to be known as the Wagatha Christie case this morning. You may remember the dispute from 2022 when footballer Wayne Rooney's wife, Colleen, suspected Rebecca Vardy of leaking her private Instagram account post to The Sun. Vardy denied the claims and in turn sued Rooney for libel, which led Rooney to stage her own sting operation to prove that she was right. The High Court, which ruled Rooney's accusations were substantially true back in 2022, oh, it goes on, doesn't it, decides this morning how much Vardy has to pay Rooney in costs. OK, let's find out. Legal commentator Joshua Rozenberg joins me this morning for a look back on this iconic case. Hi, Joshua. It's good to see you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. So I've sort of tried to say what the case is about. The bottom line is it's going to be a payday for Mrs. Rooney this morning.
Exactly so. Remember that Rebecca Vardy sued Colleen Rooney. Civil litigation works on the principle that the loser pays all. Vardy's claim was dismissed by the judge a couple of years ago because, as you say, Rooney had proved that this social media post famously ending with the phrase, "It's Rebecca Vardy's account," she proved that was substantially true. And so because Vardy lost her claim, she has to pay the legal costs. Not the whole legal costs, turns out to be 90% of the legal costs, but nevertheless, she has to pay. Now, normally that sort of thing would be sorted out between the lawyers. They'd agree on what the costs were. We can infer that at least when this case was listed last Friday afternoon, they hadn't agreed on the amounts. So it goes before a costs judge who will work out what the sum of money is that will be paid as a result of this case.
And how is that amount calculated?
Well, the cost judge, who's a very experienced adjudicator, will look at all the bills and work out what's fair and reasonable. Now, as I say, there was a reduction of 10% ordered by Mrs. Justice Steyn because of a couple of factors. Rooney's weak allegation that Vardy was one of the people behind a particular gossip column in The Sun, Rooney's unsuccessful public interest defence. But broadly speaking, the party who was wrongly sued, the party who won, the party who proved that what she said was true, that's Rebecca, that's Colleen Rooney. She will get the sum that the cost judge awards because it clearly hasn't been agreed. Maybe there's a dispute over the amount. Maybe there's a dispute over what should be included.
And does that mean Rebecca Vardy has any further claim to try to get this reduced, any further appeal, or is that it then?
I would imagine that will be it. I mean, it's always possible to challenge this sort of thing further if you've got some grounds for doing so, but I can't really see that it's going to go any further. It may well be settled on the door of the court. These things sometimes are. But clearly, Rebecca Vardy was advised that she might lose this case. She was determined to fight it. She lost. And she appears to be determined to fight over the amount of money that she now has to pay as a result of losing this case.
Are they expected to, do they have to turn up to court today?
They certainly don't. I mean, if you look at the court lists, it says in person, and the reason for that is that this isn't going to be conducted remotely on Zoom or some other platform like that. But no, I expect it'll be the lawyers who'll be there, although I'm sure there will be snappers outside just hoping that one or both of them will turn up.
Yeah. And what's your prediction about what might happen, or are you not allowed to do that?
I can predict. I mean, we know that the figures that we're talking about are £1.5 million. That was the figure that was being talked about last October. The costs that Rooney incurred in defending Vardy's claim was just over £1.6 million. And if you take 10% off, that's 1.5. And of course, Vardy also has to pay her own legal costs, which must be comparable. So she may well be out of pocket to the sum of £3 million, and presumably Rooney will get pretty much the sort of claim that she's asking for if the cost judge decides it's justified.
One of my old bosses always used to say, always threaten, never sue. And with prices like that you have to pay your lawyers, you can see why.
This is libel is a game that only the rich can play.
Exactly that. Joshua, it's good to see you. Thank you. Let's have a look at today's weather for you, should we? It's looking something like this. Unsettled conditions look set to last a few days yet, but it will turn drier by Friday. There's cloud and rain from Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland through to the southeast at the moment, but northern and eastern Britain mostly fine. Ireland is cloudy but mainly dry. Southwestern Britain will remain largely overcast this morning, with prolonged rain clearing to a scattering of showers. That Christmas movie, Home Alone. Remember
classic
it?
of the genre.
Yeah.
Classic.
I think there's two, isn't there? Home Alone.
Yes.
Isn't there four? Is there?
What?
Yeah. You've missed out too.
We've missed out too. Also, the bigger breaking news is that Mari has the up-to-date knowledge on movies.
Yeah, can I just say, I haven't, if there are 4, I haven't seen 4, but I've definitely seen the first 2, which are the ones that everyone's watched, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really proud of myself for that one, guys.
Spoiler alert, I haven't seen either of them. Here we go. The reason we're talking about it is because the house where Kevin McAllister was left home alone for Christmas has been put on the market for more than $5 million. It's been fully renovated since it featured in the 1990 classic and now boasts a cinema and a basketball court as well, which sounds pretty fabulous, doesn't it? So why is he left home alone? What happens?
It's one of those classic comedy capers, and I don't want to give away the plot because I know you will go and watch it this Christmas. But that was a look at absolutely not. Absolutely. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's your level of Christmas kind of prep, is it?
Exactly.
Whilst you're wrapping the paper, just gunfire everywhere.
Yeah,
It's basically...
You've not seen Die Hard?
No, I've never seen Die Hard. I know I need to watch that. I'm getting through it, and my husband made me watch Home Alone #1 and #2 a couple of years ago, so I'm finally up to date with that. So I can tell you, it's about a little boy who gets left behind, and he gets very resourceful.
OK. OK.
I think that's a good summary without spoiling it.
Bigger spoiler alert, of course I've seen it.
Oh, come on.
Fake news. Fake news.
Honestly. I just wanted to talk about Die Hard instead. Bruce Willis always used to say, it's not a Christmas movie, but it is. And if you haven't seen it, it's really very good. Okay. I would recommend that one.
It's next on the list.
OK, it's not though, is it?
It is.
Okay.
Armageddon was always quite often on before Christmas. I remember watching that quite a lot. That was kind of a good warm-up to festivities.
That sounds pretty dark.
Can we stop talking about Christmas on these 20-something of May?
It's his birthday this week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Friday.
I know.
I won't be here.
I know. I've done the research. Still to come on the programme for you today, though, we are going to be back with all today's top stories after this short break, and we are going to be talking about Labour and what the 121 businesses that have signed up, and the Tories and their triple lock plus.
Which sounds like a TV catch-up channel, in my opinion.
It does actually. Deja vu. Yeah, let's see if it is going to be deja vu. We will be back, as I said, in just a few moments' time. And Jonathan Reynolds is joining us for Labour. We've heard from Mel Stride this morning, who said that Boris Johnson will have a major role in the election campaign. Boris Johnson says he's going to be overseas for most of it. You decide.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme, Rishi Sunak woos pensioners as he tries to get the Conservative election campaign back on track.
Well, we'll be speaking to Labour's Jonathan Reynolds as the Shadow Chancellor pitches to business leaders this morning.
Plus, we'll be speaking to the former footballer Ashley Cain, who's planning to run, cycle and then kayak the length of the UK in memory of his daughter.
It's Tuesday, the 28th of May. Rishi Sunak unveils a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut. While Labour claim backing from more than 120 business chiefs ahead of a speech from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Our correspondents are travelling around the country this morning with the parties on the campaign trail. Also ahead, 30 million South Africans prepare to vote as well. We report from Nelson Mandela's hometown, where people are forced to drink water from muddy puddles. The Wagatha Christie case is back in court this morning. A specialist judge will decide how much Rebecca Vardy has to pay in legal costs. And the house used in Home Alone goes up for sale for more than $5 million. Morning, everybody. It's day 6 of a chaotic election campaign, and the Prime Minister is trying to restore order with a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut. Conservative campaign headquarters has accused some Tories of not working hard enough, but Government Minister Mel Stride told this programme that Boris Johnson, for one, would be campaigning vigorously. And he wants weekly debates between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Labour is sticking with its core message: it's time for change. And they say more than 120 business leaders agree with them. In a moment, we'll be live with our correspondents right around the country on the campaign trail. But first, here's Murray.
The Prime Minister is trying to keep his eye on the ball, but he's struggling with his team. An internal memo has accused MPs of failing to get behind the campaign and knock on doors. Tory Minister Steve Baker was even accused of giving up after jetting off to Greece on holiday. And outgoing MP for Telford, Lucy Allen, was suspended from the Conservatives after backing the rival Reform candidate in her old seat. Today, Rishi Sunak is hoping a promise to raise the tax-free pension allowance via a triple lock plus will get his party back on track.
What happened to some pensioners having to pay income tax on their pensions? Can you guarantee that that won't happen under a Conservative government?
On the basic state pension, if that is your form of income, then under our plans we will make sure that you are covered by the personal allowance. In other words, you're in that no tax band.
Elsewhere, the Conservatives have accused Keir Starmer of not having the energy to campaign, branding him Sir Sleepy. Perhaps the sight of the Labour leader taking a tea break isn't the best way to rebut that charge, but he called the attack desperate.
When Rishi Sunak says everything's fine, we've turned a corner, that is so disrespectful for people who are struggling. That really means something to me, because I do know what it's like to struggle, and to see people going backwards in life through no fault of their own, that makes me angry.
And this morning, it's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves in the spotlight with a speech on the economy. More than 120 business chiefs have signed a letter backing Labour. But she's also under attack, with a report claiming Labour's tax raid on private schools would force nearly half of fee-paying pupils into the state system. Keir Starmer acknowledges tough decisions will need to be made, but appealing to pensioners could give Sunak the edge over his rivals. Mari Aurora, Sky News.
Well, we have correspondents out on the campaign trail for you this morning, tomorrow, following Labour, Rob with the Conservatives, Matthew is with the Lib Dems in God's own country up there in the northwest. So let's start with you, Matthew, this hour. What's going on?
We're in the glorious Lake District today. It is, can you believe it, the Liberal Democrats' only seat in the north of England, and no doubt they'll be hoping to add at least one or two more to that come the election in a few weeks' time. We're here in the constituency of one Tim Farron, former leader of the Liberal Democrats, of course, and we are expecting a photo op with him and the current leader, Ed Davey, at some point later today. One of the things that the Liberal Democrats always struggle with in election campaigns is getting themselves heard when the narrative almost inevitably becomes about who's going to be the next Prime Minister. Will it be the Labour Party? Will it be the Conservative Party? And so one of the things party sources are telling us is that their plan to try and catch the attention is to do a series of stunts for which the Democrats have become rather well known over the last few years. So we're not quite sure what's in store over the next few weeks, but we're told it will be worth watching and we'll be there throughout. But the main focus for the Liberal Democrats will be back in the south, and we'll head towards their heartlands and the former heartlands in the southwest later this week. The challenge there is to break through the so-called Tory blue wall, seats many of which have been Tory for generations or longer that the Liberal Democrats think that they can now tap into. And one of the key ways that they have to do that is, it's interesting, they're not directly fighting many Labour-facing seats, but they are in some ways fighting Labour's success. What they've got to do, party strategists tell us, is convince Labour voters that in certain seats in the south of England, only the Liberal Democrats are the challengers to the Tories. And they think if they can get that element of tactical voting, it will put a whole raft of other Tory seats within their grasp, some big ones, the likes of the Chancellor, for example, in Godalming and Ash, and also Michael Gove's former seat in Surrey Heath.
Thanks for now. Where are you, Rob?
OK, yeah, somewhere in Warwickshire on the M1 at the moment, heading towards Staffordshire and Leicestershire for a couple of campaigning stops that Rishi Sunak has got in the diary, plugging the latest big announcement, the second new announcement on the Tory campaign. Another pretty bold one that may well prove divisive. It's basically an income tax cut for pensioners, but the way it's being done is by expanding the triple lock. That's that really expensive ratchet mechanism that pushes up the value of the state pension as it stands. Basically, the Tories want that to apply to tax allowances, income tax allowances, but only for pensioners. So they say that means that if you just get your income from the state pension, you'll never pay income tax on it. Look, the rub here is it will only apply to pensioners. So if you're of working age, you won't see your income tax allowance go up. That's frozen along with the national insurance allowance as well, and will remain frozen for another few years. So I think given that we have seen the triple lock push up the state pension by almost 20% over the last 2 tax years, this is going to prompt questions of generational fairness. I think there will be questions as well about how it's being paid for. £2.5 billion a year it will cost by the end of the Parliament, paid for, the Tories say, through cracking down on aggressive tax avoidance and tax evasion, not necessarily guaranteed revenue, although Tory sources pointing out this morning that Labour say they will be paying for some of their measures through similar schemes as well. Look, this is very political. It's clearly, like the National Service announcement, an attempt to appeal to the Tory core vote, the Tory base. I think that says something. It speaks to a Tory campaign that may well be in quite a defensive mode. I think the aim here, though, as well, is to try and pose the question to Labour, would you mirror this? So far, Labour haven't said they would. Expect Tories to be out today accusing Labour of tax rises for pensioners. Of course, as I say, I think after the last few days, a bumpy start for Rishi Sunak. We saw that MP in Telford, Tory MP backing the Reform candidate. He's reaching out today into some of the more sort of traditional battleground seats for a general election. But the strategy so far seems to be clear. Focus on the Tory base and try and keep as many existing traditional Tory voters with the party as possible.
Tomorrow you're also on a coach, I'm guessing, heading up to see Rachel Reeves?
That's right. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is giving a speech in the East Midlands today, and she will have a spring in her step because today Labour have the support of 121 business leaders writing a letter to the Times saying it's time for a change of government. These are senior figures from the worlds of retail, finance and manufacturing, saying that for too long the economy has been beset with instability, stagnation and lack of long-term focus, and they particularly mention political instability, and they say that Labour has changed. That will be music to the Shadow Chancellor's ears, and is now ready to be the party of business. So Labour very pleased with that, because people who've watched a lot of these elections will know that this is traditionally what the Conservatives do, get captains of industry to support their policies, and this is the result of many months of Rachel Reeves going on what's been described as a prawn cocktail offensive, going off to meet with and charm business leaders, assure them that Labour is not going to be overspending if it gets into government. Now, the Conservatives have been picking this apart a bit, saying, look, there's no FTSE 100 sort of chief executives there, but then those people often don't endorse a political party in a campaign. And although the Conservatives did get some support for their measures in the autumn statement last year, this is full-throated support of Labour, and the party will be very pleased with that endorsement, seeing the economy as the key battleground. Rachel Reeves will be describing Labour as the party of business, but also the party of workers' rights, because remember, they've been negotiating with the trade unions on that for a while now. Must be said, they're also continuing to enjoy the row over national service. I don't know if you can see this, Kay. We've been presented with this dossier by Labour, picture of Dad's Army, and 53 questions about exactly how it's going to work.
OK, for now, Tamara, thank you, of course, covering the speech live for you here on Sky News around about 10 o'clock. Thanks to all three of you for now. Meantime, Israel's Prime Minister insists he won't end Israel's war in Gaza despite global outrage over the deaths of civilians in Rafah. Let's get more, should we, with our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. Hello to you, Alistair. He says it was a tragic mistake, but the deaths in the refugee camp in Rafah, but their assault will continue.
Yeah, Benjamin Netanyahu did admit that Israel was at fault. I mean, he had no real choice because the IDF had already concluded that. But the Prime Minister, speaking in the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, yesterday, often interrupted by heckles from families of some of those still being held hostage inside Gaza. Well, Netanyahu said that it was a mistake, but put it down to a technical error, and said that Israel would continue fighting inside Gaza. And well, they might. I think there's been many moments during the last 8 months of war that have felt like turning points, and yet nothing has changed, and the Israelis have carried on defiantly to pursue their goal of eliminating Hamas. And that could be the same this time around. Having said that, international condemnation has been pretty swift and stern. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, said he was outraged by the airstrikes in Rafah. The Italian and the German governments both said that Israel should halt the offensive. The EU is starting to talk about potential sanctions against Israel. The Americans are tying themselves in a knot somewhat. They can't quite establish what their red line on Rafah was, and they're now flitting between condemnation but continuing to support their ally.
OK, for now, thank you. Rest of today's news, we know. Here's Gareth. Morning.
Good morning. Yes, let's start with Pope Francis, who's been accused of using an offensive term aimed at gay men. Let's bring in our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us now. And Adam, tell us more about these comments, reportedly made in private, but reportedly very offensive as well.
Yeah, reportedly made at the Italian Bishops' Conference, and this was behind closed doors, but said to have been said on May the 20th, then passed on to members of the Italian media who have repeated them. And it is said that Pope Francis used an extremely offensive turn of phrase, asked if gay men should now be allowed to train for the priesthood as long as they remained celibate. He is reported to have first said no outright, and has then used an extremely offensive term to refer to members of the gay community. Now, defenders of Pope Francis have said that sometimes they say he makes mistakes in Italian, that he uses turns of phrase, doesn't realise how offensive they are. Others have said, well, he may be from Argentina originally, but he was brought up in an Italian-speaking household. They say that he knew what he was saying, that he just didn't know that these things would be repeated. His defenders say that he has actually been supportive of greater inclusivity. His detractors now say that this was grotesquely offensive.
Adam, for the moment, thank you. Here in the UK, the Metropolitan Police has launched a nationwide criminal investigation following the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It will take into account the findings of the public inquiry, which is expected to conclude later this year. Hundreds of sub-postmasters were wrongly convicted after Fujitsu's faulty Horizon IT system made it appear as though money was missing at their branches. France's Transport Minister has warned that strict new EU border controls could lead to operational consequences and civil unrest at airports. The rules will require all non-EU passport holders to have their fingerprints and photo taken when they first arrive in the bloc from October. Both the UK and France have expressed concerns over the measures, which will also apply to those travelling on both the Eurostar and ferries. Police have urged pensioners to be vigilant after it was revealed that almost £29 million was lost to courier fraud in the last year. Police say people in their 80s are the most likely to be targeted and accounted for 43% of all victims. Each person lost on average £20,000 to the scams, in which fraudsters pose as police officers or bank officials and trick people into handing money over to a courier.
Looking at some of this morning's papers for you here on Sky News, The Telegraph reports on the Prime Minister's pledge to never impose tax on the state pension. The Express says the proposal would hand pensioners a £100 tax cut next year by raising their personal allowance. The Financial Times says it could help shore up elderly votes for the Conservatives. And the Metro reports on Sir Keir Starmer's first speech on the campaign trail, in which he talked about his tough working-class upbringing. And the Mirror leading with Keir Starmer's dismissing Rishi Sunak's national service idea as a teenage dad's army. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is set to make her first major speech of the election campaign this morning as more than 120 business leaders back Labour's economic plan. Let's talk about it in more detail. Jonathan Reynolds is with us now. Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade is his formal title. It's good to see you, Mr. Reynolds. Thanks for taking the time. You've got the backing of 121 business leaders in the Times this morning. I see a letter there. What's more important, business leaders or unions and workers to you?
Morning, Kay. Well, you need both. You need both for a strong economy. We need better business investment in the UK. That's been very poor, the lowest of any major economy for some years now. We need better productivity, better growth, and we need more secure work and jobs. And that is exactly what Labour's, what we call our pro-worker, pro-business agenda is all about. The fact that you've got so many significant business figures feeling they can come out and say Labour's changed, only Labour's got a plan for the economy, alongside the fact that we are unashamedly going to end exploitative zero-hours contracts or practices like fire and rehire, I think shows that we have built a coalition, a set of people who want better for the UK, who want better for the British economy, and we need both of those components together. But actually, you know, Kate, when I go to a business, a factory or whatever, often what I'm told by the trade union reps is the same as what I'm told by the management. It starts by saying, please, some stability, no more Liz Trusses, please a good industrial policy, please tackle things like the apprenticeship levy and the relationship to the European Union and ambition on net zero that is required. And that's Labour's plan, and I'm looking forward to Rachel setting out the agenda in full later today.
OK, she's promised to lower taxes for working people while also not making public spending cuts. Does she have a magic money tree in her back garden?
It's not a magic money tree, Kay, but it is, I think, the question that should be at the heart of this general election. So if you think most people in the UK they know they're paying high taxes, they're the highest by historical standards. They know public services aren't very good. I mean, record NHS waiting lists, schools not opening for the school year because of falling concrete. And the reason for that, And the reason for that is low economic growth. So that's why a speech today from Rachel, setting out the comprehensive set of measures, the Labour plan for growth, which is about stability, yes, but also about industrial strategy, fixing the apprenticeship levy, a bit more flexibility for businesses there, improving the relationship to the European Union, our green prosperity plan, getting industrial energy prices down. These are all necessary. These are practical, real, deliverable things. But they do also have, as part of them, I'll say again, our package to make work pay, to give people more security in the workplace, to drive up wages. And that is going to be the answer. If we continue as we've done for the last 14 years, it's going to be cuts and misery and bad news. But let's have some optimism and excitement for the future. And I think we can do better than how we've done.
So Labour is going to be able to lower taxes and improve public spending. You need to give me more information about how you're going to do that.
OK, well, let's go back to what we've seen for the last 14 years. We've seen very low business investment, very poor productivity, very poor, by historical standards for the UK, economic growth. Really, the economy has grown through immigration rather than more productive capacity per head. And so that is why people are looking at why their taxes are high, but they're not getting the public services that they want. That is what we've got to break out of. Now, we should say to ourselves, do we really believe things can't get better than how they have been for the last few years? Or do we look to ourselves and say, when we look to certain sectors of the British economy, we do excel, look at the talent we've got, look at the innovation, look at our higher education base and our research funding, we can do better, but it's not working on the current path.
So what sort of timescale are we talking about?
Now, I believe by the first term of a Labour government, we can see growth return to the kind of standards we would expect. And actually, I think we can do even better than that, because we've got a set of pragmatic, practical measures. And look, I would say to people, don't just take my word for it as someone running for re-election in a general election, or who wants to be this country's business and trade secretary. Look at the businesses who've endorsed that plan today. Serious people, household names.
None of them in the top 100 FTSE, though, are they?
Well, look at those names. Businesses like Iceland and institutions like Wikipedia and Nissan and Wagamama and JD Sports, things people will be familiar with. It is an extraordinary, I think, turnaround, a recognition of how Labour has changed.
OK.
To win the confidence of so many
will you be increasing taxes for higher earners?
That's not part of Labour's plans. We've set out a set of ways to boost spending on public services. There's no plans to raise taxes on higher earners. Where we have spending changes to the government, we always say how those would be paid for. So, for instance, on education, it is the taxation of private schools in order to put those teachers and mental health support
into... I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a report this morning, a survey this morning, saying that 224,000 pupils, their parents are likely to take them from private schools. If you do add this 20% VAT, they'll have to be finding spaces for these kids in state schools. And also the amount of money that you were hoping to get from these private schools will be reduced by almost 40%, according to this latest survey. What would you say in response to that?
Well, I've seen some of those headlines. I'm afraid I don't think it's a credible report with findings that could hold up against scrutiny. I would direct anyone to look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies and their very authoritative piece of work on it. Of course, we do have a declining birth rate in the UK, so there would be space in the state education system if people did come across. The modelling on the money that will be raised does take into account the fact that some people, a small proportion, will go into the state sector. But I think, again, look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies. It's an independent and very authoritative report on the revenue that we will raise. And it's just a pragmatic set of choices about how we will get more money for new teachers, new mental health support for people into state schools, which, of course, the vast majority of British children go to in the UK.
Are you expecting Diane Abbott to stand for the Labour Party in Hackney North and Stoke Newington?
Well, to be honest, Kate, I have no additional information on that. The Labour Party has a process which is independent of Labour politicians and people like me. I, of course, want every situation like that to be resolved as soon as possible, particularly for people who've been very significant in the history of the Labour Party, trailblazers. I would like those things resolved, but of course, it's an independent process, as it should be, so I don't have any additional information or role in that, I'm afraid.
But you'd be happy to welcome her back?
I wouldn't. Anytime you've got a disciplinary process, I want that to be resolved in a way which has genuine contrition, which resolves the problem. But I don't know the set of circumstances in this case. I genuinely don't.
OK, there's some suggestions on social media today that actually this was concluded some 5 months ago and nothing has been done to welcome her back into the party. She did suffer some penalty, but has now served that. That's not something that you can or want to comment on.
Well, I can't, but I can say that I've been on the media on many occasions, and you at times have been putting quite rightly here the questions to me about conduct of colleagues where that has fallen short, and you've obviously wanted to know how will Labour react to this? Will we take these things seriously? And when a colleague is in a position as they're in, it is of course regrettable, but if it comes from something they've said or done, we're all accountable for those actions, for what we say and do as politicians. So of course I want a robust process in place to deal with that, and I can say Labour does have that today.
Yeah, I mean, let me just press you once more on that, because the suggestion is that she finished the investigation into her suspension finished 5 months ago. A source telling a colleague of mine at the BBC that she was given a formal warning in December of 2023, required to do an online anti-Semitism course, which she did in February, and yet she still doesn't know whether she can stand as a Labour candidate at the next election. She's quoted as saying she's angry, depressed and worn out.
I don't have the information to give you more clarity on that. I think it's right that I and people like me are independent of that process. I do want these things resolved as soon as possible, and I want there to be the full set of Labour candidates in every constituency in the country, which we're close to doing, even though the election was a surprise last week. And I hope these things can genuinely be resolved as soon as possible.
And what do you say to those that refer to Keir Starmer as so sleepy?
I think it's laughable, and I would look at the Labour start to the general election campaign, compare that to the Conservative parties, and feel real confidence, not just in the Labour message, Labour policies, but also in Keir Starmer, who I think would make a tremendous Prime Minister if we get the chance to do that.
Let's wait and see. Not long to wait now. Quicker than you thought. It's good to see you. Come and see us in the studio sometime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Let's talk about Wagatha Christie, should we? It's back in court again today. Tell me more.
Yeah, gripping stuff, wasn't this, for a large chunk of the nation. It had a phone thrown overboard.
No, it was lost.
Lost overboard. Yeah, accidentally ended
on a
up
ferry in the North Sea
just after they'd been asked to be handed over by the courts. Yeah. Lost passwords, secret sleuthing, and 2 footballers' wives. So Colleen Rooney, Rebecca Vardy, ultimately ended up in victory for Rooney and a whopper of a legal bill for Rebecca Vardy. So that's what we find out today, just how much Rebecca Vardy is going to have to pay in legal costs. Just to take you back to the beginning and where this all started, Colleen Rooney realised that someone was leaking stories about her private life to the press. She had an idea who it was, and she came up with a plan, a sting operation. So what she did was planted fake stories on her private Instagram account. But this is key. She changed the privacy settings. It meant that only one person, her suspect, could see those stories. And what do you know? They end up in the press, in the Sun. One of them, for example, a fake flood in her basement. So now that she's sure who is behind this, she puts a post on social media, it goes viral. And it's at that point the suspect, Rebecca Vardy, says, no, it's not me, and decides to sue for defamation. So it ends up in court. Now, sadly for Rebecca Vardy, a judge ruled that the post was substantially true. That was in July of 2022, and that it was likely that Vardy's agent was passing that information on. So she was the one with the phone that accidentally or whatever ended up in the North Sea. So Rebecca Vardy's already been told she'll pay 90% of Colleen Rooney's costs, and actually, just to get it going, they made her give £800,000 in November of 2022. Today we find out exactly how much that, in the end, the bill will be in front of a specialist High Court judge. So that all kicks off at 10:30. They might turn up, who knows?
I bet they don't.
Yeah, I bet they don't.
Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Entering the 6th day of the election campaign, we'll hear from Jack and Sam about what to expect next. And from Land's End to John O'Groats, and back again. Then back again. We'll speak to the former footballer undertaking a gruelling challenge in memory of his daughter. And the house used in Christmas classic Home Alone is up for sale, but for how much? We'll find out next.
There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Everybody, welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Interesting from Jonathan Reynolds?
Yeah, a fascinating interview on a few points, really. So, first of all, he said, you know, he ruled out no tax rises on higher earners when you were kind of pushing him on the economy. Obviously, he's the Shadow Business Secretary and he's trying to, you know, drum up excitement for Rachel Reeves' speech today. And I thought that was interesting that he ruled that out. But what was also interesting was when you pushed him on the claims around private schools and the fact that there are concerns that the increase in VAT, well, the application of VAT on private schools could push people into the state system because they then can't afford it and essentially are priced out. He was saying that report isn't credible. We don't believe that report. Let's focus on the IFS work that they've done. And then he also said, well, there's a declining birth rate, which means that there should be space in state schools eventually, which I thought was a fascinating way to try and justify a policy. When you think about why there is a declining birth rate, not necessarily the best waters you want to go into.
Declining birth rate, it means you won't get as much money from the VAT in the private schools.
It also means you won't get as much money from tax in many ways, because as soon as they turn 18, there's less people to work and fund your pensioners. So, you know, there's a whole kettle of fish there.
Yeah.
And I don't think as many... Obviously, there's lots of people who are very wealthy who can afford private schools, and it's no issue at all. But there's an awful lot of people who maybe send their kids there because they need the extra educational need. Maybe... Should I try this? Should I try this? We'll do this again.
There we go.
I was going to do that in interpretive dance if needed. I would do the whole segment about schools and interpretive dance. But there's lots of people that obviously are very wealthy and can afford it. But there are lots of people who send their kids because they need the extra educational support or particular focus on arts or music or whatever, who will go 20% more. It's a lot of money regardless. And there will be a bit of pushback.
Keir Starmer spoke about that in his speech yesterday. He was asked specifically on his Q&A yesterday, and he said, I understand the aspiration behind it, and I respect that, but we have to make tough decisions, and we can't afford it, so tough. That was basically what he said.
And can you do interpretive dance because you went to private school?
I did go to private school, but I can't do interpretive dance if you do not want to see.
How very reassuring.
And considering what some of the top stories are, I shall err away from the interpretive.
Yeah, you can do the top stories, though.
I shall do. I'll remind you of those this morning. Let's start, shall we, with Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that something went tragically wrong after airstrikes targeting 2 senior Hamas militants killed a reported 45 people and injured dozens more in displacement camp in Rafah. On the day that Ireland officially recognises a Palestinian state, the Scottish First Minister is calling on Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to immediately do the same. Metropolitan Police have launched a nationwide investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It's understood around 80 detectives are involved, but no charges are expected to be brought until 2026 at the earliest.
Politics at Jack and Sam's has now gone daily for the duration of the election campaign. They are on the road. In fact, Jack was supposed to be on holiday. Ha! Let's see how that worked out for him. Hi, Jack.
Hello. I am sort of still on holiday. Look, here I am in Anglesey. You can see the backdrop behind me. So I had to go because my family wouldn't let me. But unfortunately, the sort of not working bit of the holiday hasn't gone quite so well. So here I am sat in a conservatory with a rain-swept North Wales landscape behind me, sat at a laptop reading about the election like everybody else.
Exactly. You've already done a couple of podcasts as well, right?
Yeah. Sam dragged me out of on my first day of my so-called holiday on Sunday, dragged me straight to the microphone to talk about really why we didn't manage to predict this general election. You know, our podcast is all about telling people what's coming up in the week ahead. Well, last week we did not realise that Rishi Sunak was about to do this. So we thought it'd be fun and interesting to just pick over like how he managed to pull a fast one on everybody in Westminster and make this happen without anyone knowing it was coming.
Yeah, I believe, Sam, what happened, I think you've just got off a train, Sam, actually. I believe what happened was Jack pointed you to a tweet from a colleague at the FT and you went, nah.
That's right. That's exactly what happened. We did talk about speculating on whether or not an early election was going to be announced next week, but we just thought it's not happening. It's not going to. We've talked about it too many times. We don't want to get into fall into the trap of speculating every week, so we discarded it. I actually asked somebody in number 10, but didn't really follow up on it, much to my shame. So it was a big miss, and so we're atoning, and we're atoning by doing many, many more podcasts over this election period.
OK, Jack, who's doing the best in this campaign so far? I don't mean between you two, I mean between the two main parties.
Well, I would say it's been a bumpy start for the Conservatives. I really feel like that rain-sodden start to the campaign with Rishi Sunak looking so drowned in Downing Street will be remembered and noticed by people. It's just not a good image to kick off a campaign. You see Sam there very wisely sheltering under Sky News' umbrella as he broadcast the camera. Rishi Sunak choosing not to do that last week, I think, was a big mistake, and I think people will have that seared on their memory. And we've seen since then, we've seen defections, we've seen ministers contradicting each other. It hasn't been a brilliant start for the Tories. However, they have also announced already a couple of pretty eye-catching policies which have made the running, and Labour have chosen not to do that. Labour are sort of doing a steady-as-she-goes campaign where they're trying not to rock the boat, and so people are talking about Tory policies in a way that they're not talking about Labour policies.
And the Trumpian name-calling has already started, Sam, with some Conservatives referring to Keir Starmer as Sir Sleepy. Stand by, just listen to what Mel Stride had to say about that. Why are you calling him Sir Sleepy? I mean, is that language that you would condone?
Sorry,
Sir Sleepy, is that language that you would condone?
It's not a term that I have used or would use. I think whatever age you are in life, I think people have a huge amount to contribute, and some of the most effective.
It's very wise you said that. I'm the same age as Keir Starmer.
Well, exactly. Well, I'm in the same bracket, so I should declare an interest.
There we go. Yeah, it's not going to land, do you think, Sam, or do you think it will stick?
It's such an obvious copy of what Donald Trump uses in America. The question is, as with all political attacks and political insults, do they feel like there's a grain of truth in it? And I have to say, energy levels it's never struck me as a particular weakness for Keir Starmer, certainly not for Rishi Sunak. I know that the Tory campaign want to draw the contrast. Keir Starmer, oddly, is a bit older than he looks and actually manages to carry it off by looking quite energetic. So I think this one is a tricky one. It was notable yesterday that when Rishi Sunak himself was asked whether he endorsed that particular political insult that's emanating from Conservative headquarters, he declined to.
OK, what's your thought on that, Jack?
I think, again, it's a Tory campaign that is desperate to be seen to be doing something and trying to change things. They are 20-odd points behind in the polls. They urgently need things to change. And so we're seeing insults thrown at Labour that get people like us talking about it on the show. We've seen these big policy announcements about national service for young people, extra money for pensioners. Again, it's all designed just to get people talking about the Tory campaign and on the Tory turf, if you like. And even if the insult itself doesn't land and people think it's a bit childish and pathetic and a bit Trumpian and not really what we do in British politics, which many people probably will think that, nevertheless, it eats up the airtime and gets people talking about the Tories. And I think that the calculation inside Tory HQ is that that is a good thing when you're 20-odd points behind, because something has to change, Kay, or they're going to lose.
Yeah, I saw, I mean, when he first announced that he was going to call the election, he looked like a drowned rat, didn't he, Sam, outside number 10. But I saw him chatting about it on with members of the public, I think it was yesterday, and he seems to have turned that around for him.
I think that's certainly...
I learned something quite interesting about...
Oh, sorry, Sam.
I learned something quite interesting about that, the image of him outside Downing Street. The Conservative Party were curious about what the wider public reaction to that was. So they actually put it to a focus group. They asked, what do you think of the fact that Rishi Sunak made that announcement in the rain, didn't have an umbrella, and all the rest of it. And I'm told by the Conservative campaign that the public were completely unbothered by it. But perhaps they would say that, would they? But I thought it was fascinating that they had to focus group that moment in the first place. I mean, nobody would have gone into this campaign expecting that to be a thing. Look, I think you can see that moment two ways. Rishi Sunak went out without an umbrella because he just thought, I have to do it. It would be ridiculous to drag people inside. I'd be criticised for that too. And you can see a world, if things start going better, that it's Rishi Sunak battling against all the obstacles in order to deliver what he wants. But at the moment, I feel like Tory MPs, at least, put it apace with a tricky start to the campaign that's seen outgoing Tory MP suspended, the West Midlands mayor candidate who lost, saying he's not going to go and become an MP, Andy Street's announcement last night, and a grumpy minister, Steve Baker, saying he's going to Greece, even though he's got a marginal seat that he's trying to hold. So at the moment, the kind of obstacles are clocking up. Conservative headquarters say our policies are working. They're hoping that the polls show some narrowing, but I think we're in an absolutely critical phase where the Tories need to show some positive progress so there's not outright panic in the Tory ranks.
Jack, I'm just looking at the latest charts, and you guys are up 12 places in this week's charts for politics at Jack and Sam's. What are you going to talk about today?
I mean, the plan is that every morning we will talk about the day ahead in the election campaign. We'll think about where the big moments are likely to be, and we will tee people up for what's important. There are three big things happening today, Kay. The Tories are unveiling this policy of extra money for pensioners, a triple lock plus, they're calling it. And that's obviously on the back of sending young people off to join the army or whatever. So you can see the message they're trying to send about where their core support is. We'll be talking about Labour's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves making a big speech up in the Midlands to business leaders, and Nigel Farage making his campaign debut today down in Dover. So the idea is that when this daily podcast gets up and running, we'll be teeing everyone up for the day ahead, so you can sort of get your head in gear in the morning and see exactly the contours of the day's election campaign panning out before you.
OK, just before I let you go, Sam, it says here we have to ask Sam about underpants.
Election campaigns are unpredictable, okay? And on a previous election campaign, it is quite true. When I was working for The Times, I ended up covering a debate in Cambridge at short notice and having to stay the night. And I ended up having to borrow some underpants from a BBC colleague who very kindly gave me some fresh out of the packet that he had purchased, never worn before, I stress. But the important thing I want to stress is BBC correspondents wear Y-fronts, Kay. The world needs to know.
Don't know where to go with that, so I'll say thank you. Have a great day, both. And hopefully we'll chat to you again later on in the week. Thank you. A new episode of Politics at Jack and Sam's is out now. Scan the QR code on the screen to listen to Jack and Sam talking about how Rishi Sunak surprised them and many others with an early election. Were you surprised, Wilf?
What, but by the underpants story or the early election? I was certainly very surprised by the early election. Do you know what? Revelation there for the underpants story. I had thought from reading on Twitter that it was this election campaign, so I didn't realise it was an old story, but headline grabbing nonetheless there. On the agenda for us today, you just heard about it from Jack and Sam. 10 a.m, Rachel Reeves' speech will be focused on that. In fact, the Prime Minister expected to give his main remarks today a bit earlier than he did yesterday, also possibly in the 10 a.m. hour a little bit later, if not in the 11 a.m. hour. So lots to focus on there. And, of course, Nigel Farage, as Jack was teasing ahead to. It's interesting, though, Kay, talking about all of the pluses and minuses of the election campaign so far, because I think that if anyone wanted to really see how you deliver a clear and compelling message with energy, enthusiasm, they should come to you for advice, because the best part of the campaign so far was your election promo video, which,
let's have a look.
I have to say, really, I've rewatched it. It's that good a trailer.
Oh,
It's like watching a James Bond trailer multiple times when it comes out. It's brilliant. And you know, we talk a lot about whether or not we're going to get proper debates, long-form interviews. I think the interview we all really want to see is Burley versus Neville.
He wants to see it as well. Let's have a quick look.
The end of this gripping Premier League season, making it 7 straight wins.
When's Kay coming in?
I think they're going to kick off when she gets here.
You think of their defenders, you think of Carlos just over 6 foot away, and our match commentators.
Right, let's see what this election studio is all about then.
Lost the crowd.
Hiya. All right, mate.
How are you, Kay?
I'm good.
Sorry?
Come on, we've not got all night. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Don't say no to this one.
Is this a prank? Is that Beatles about or something?
Yeah. Kay's about.
Look, Ed's already measuring up the screens.
Well, this is fantastic. We can have maps there, charts there, and more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in.
Where's Sophie?
Enough Fergie time. Time for election time, I think you're fine. You can both... This is my studio.
We're gone as well?
Gone.
Oh, God.
See ya.
You're fired?
Oh,
I'm not joking.
To be fair, I've always wanted to take you on live, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all mouth. Yeah, I reckon we can work with this. This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
Nice to meet you.
You too, my darling. I'm coming this way first.
Hey, oh, yeah, she knows.
You're going there first.
See ya, thanks. Much better.
I wish I was surprised, but unfortunately I'm not. But whilst that sounds very scary, 21,000 people will be diagnosed with melanoma, I think it's important to say 2 things. First of all, if it's caught early, around 9 out of 10 people will survive 10 years after a melanoma diagnosis. Catching it early is key. But also, 17,000 of those 21,000 could be prevented. And whilst early treatment is brilliant and we've got more and new and interesting and innovative treatments for even late-stage melanoma, if you could avoid getting it in the first place, that would be better for everybody. It is vital that we stay out of the sun in the hottest hours between about 11 and 3, that you wear a good high-factor SPF of at least 30, and you need to check the star rating on the back, and that star rating needs to be 4 or 5. And that means you're protected against UVA and UVB. Pop on a hat. You know, these are the things that make a difference. People who we don't necessarily put sun cream on their heads, they should do, but everybody needs to wear a hat. So sun protection is key, and avoiding sunbeds. People often worry, and they worry, for example, about, oh, if I put on sun cream, I'm not going to get enough vitamin D. And research from Australia shows very clearly that we don't put on enough sun cream and we don't reapply it often enough. People are definitely getting their vitamin D. You need to be using about 2 fingers worth on just your face and neck, 2 fingers worth on your arms, 2 fingers worth on your upper legs, 2 fingers worth on your lower legs. And actually that's about a shot glass of cream to cover your whole body every couple of hours. And if you're in the water, as soon as you get out of the water as well. There are 3 kinds of skin cancer, and melanoma is the kind that comes from moles. And we use the ABCDE rule. So A stands for asymmetry. Generally, moles are broadly symmetrical. You could fold the 2 halves together. And if it looks like one bit is growing off in a different direction, it's not symmetrical anymore. That's something to see your doctor about. The borders should be nice and smooth. That's the B. If one becomes a little bit raggedy, go to the doctor. C is for colour, that you need to have less than 2 colours. And if you do have 2 colours, that again, that they're symmetrical. D, if it's under about 6 millimetres, then we tend not to worry. And E, and here's the most important one, evolving. If your mole is changing, get it checked. And with regards to the other kind of skin cancers, if you have a sore or a scaly patch or a lesion that is different and isn't getting better, go and get that checked out.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Ashley Cain is carrying out an ultra-marathon challenge to raise money for cancer 3 years after losing his young daughter to the illness. The former footballer will be running the length of the UK, cycling the length of the UK, and then kayaking the length of the UK for Azalea Foundation, named after his daughter. He's with us now. Hi, it's good to see you.
Good morning.
Where are you and what's the plan?
So I'm in John O'Groats at the minute. So I completed my 34th marathon in 34 days yesterday, running the entire length of Great Britain. And now I'm about to cycle back down before I kayak back up in this world first and world record attempt.
Goodness me. How long is it going to take you and how did you prepare for it?
With great difficulty, to be honest. I think the challenge was the 6 months leading up to it, trying to, train every day and get the amount of training in. But 34 days running over a marathon a day is very tough, mentally and physically. And it's also tough because I started on my daughter's anniversary and ran through the anniversary of Azalea to rest as well. And that just really signifies why I'm doing this, because, childhood cancer is the #1 killer of our children. It's the illness that took my daughter's life, and it receives less than 3% funding. So, with this challenge, hopefully we can raise a lot more awareness, a lot more funding, and enable, a brighter future for these children. And that's what I'm so passionate about.
And what do people do if they want to support you in that, Ashley?
I mean, people have supported in so many ways. People have lined the streets. People have came to the finish lines. But you can follow me on Instagram, which is Mr. Ashley Cain, or the Azalea Foundation on Instagram. And there's a link to the GoFundMe there. The support from the community has been absolutely incredible. Not only has it been fuel, but they're really helping us make a difference for these children. So I just wish and urge and pray that people continue.
Well, keep dipping in with us, won't you? And let us know how you're getting on. We're here. We'd love to chat to you as you make your way up and then back down and then back up again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. John Wiley's with us, adventurer extraordinaire, friend of the programme. You did your own challenge quite recently. Tell me.
I did, Kay. Good to be back and sleeping in a normal bed again. But no, just did a challenge that I called Tower Power, which was an eco-triathlon to get from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to the Eiffel Tower in France, and then to my hometown Blackpool Tower. And we took a little detour to Spinnaker Tower because I live in Hampshire, and the people of Hampshire said I need to go there as well.
OK. So why did you do it?
So I did it for 3 reasons, really. Firstly, in memory of a little boy called Jordan Banks from my hometown of Blackpool, who tragically lost his life just gone 3 years ago when he was struck by lightning, of all things, on a football pitch. We wanted to do something for the Blackpool community because Jordan was such a special little boy in his own right for fundraising and making a difference. We wanted to raise some funds and awareness for the Army Cadet Charitable Trust, an amazing youth organisation and charity that provides incredible opportunities for young people across the nation. And also, for me, thirdly, was to learn a bit more about sustainability, because by my own admission, I've been a bit of a serial offender of flying around the world to various continents on my adventures. So I just wanted to see how sustainable can we be.
And you got across the channel in a plastic boat, plastic bottles.
Yeah, yeah, literally.
How did that go?
It was a load of rubbish, literally.
Yeah.
I crossed the channel in a boat that was made from bottles, plastic bottles that children across Hampshire had collected for me. It was made from a bit of repurposed wood, and it was glued together. I got across, and I'm still here, of course, but it was pretty scary at times, and I don't recommend it to anybody.
And you got knocked off your bike?
I got knocked off my bike in Paris by a truck driver. But yeah, only a few cuts and grazes. You know, I live to tell the tale. So, but it was an amazing adventure. You know, to see the world.
How long did it take you?
It took me 31 days, 2,600-700 kilometres. And it
Harder
was
than you expected?
It was physically harder than I expected. It was on a wooden bike, so all the bike was made out of coppice wood, so sort of willow, birch and hazelwood. And it was carrying all my kit, so my tent, my food, my rations and everything.
OK, so where did you stay at night?
I stayed in my tent and sleeping bag, so I literally carried my bedroom, my kitchen, all on the bike. So it was, yeah, trying to be as sustainable as possible and give more back to the planet than I'm taking from it on an adventure. And I'm not super green or anything like that, as I say, but I just wanted to see how it could be done.
OK. And what about as far as funding is concerned? What do people need to do?
Yeah, so the fundraising's been going great. We're just short of £25,000, which is amazing, which will provide lots of opportunities. And we built this incredible memorial wall through Muir Walls up in Blackpool, which is an amazing piece of art at Blackpool Football Club to remember little Jordan. People can sponsor on towerpower2024.com. And of course, as always, big thank you to the amazing sponsors, David Miller, Family Jewellers in Hampshire, who have been great.
And what's next?
What's next?
Because you've swum with crocodiles, you've done the deepest marathon in the world, you've done all sorts of stuff. What's next? In 20 seconds.
20 seconds, what's next? Well, I'm going to be going back to Africa later in the year, so some whale shark diving, taking some volunteers out there. We've got another series of Hunted coming up later in the year.
I was about to say, people will probably recognise you from Hunted, wouldn't they?
Hunted that I didn't catch you on, Kate.
Yeah, it was the Hunted that we met, and you did try, but you didn't. Yeah, you didn't.
It wasn't good enough.
OK, looking forward to seeing that. And whatever your next journey is, come back and talk to us again, won't you?
Thank you to you and everybody at Sky for the support, as always.
It's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
You.
All today's top stories coming up for you in just a few moments here on Sky News, including the latest on the campaign trail. Do stay tuned our way.
this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
Morning, everybody. 9 o'clock coming up on today's programme. It's day 6 of a chaotic election campaign, and Rishi Sunak is wooing pensioners to try to get back on track.
The Shadow Business Secretary tells us there's no magic money tree ahead of Shadow Chancellor's speech today to business leaders. That's an hour from now.
Plus, the deadly consequences of overcrowding on Mount Everest. We'll be speaking to a mountain guide.
It's Tuesday, the 28th of May. Rishi Sunak unveils a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut, while Labour claim backing from more than 120 business chiefs ahead of a speech from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves will say she wants to lead the most pro-growth treasury in the country's history.
And after a bumpy start to the campaign, the Prime Minister is heading to the Midlands to plug his new promise for pensioners.
Also had 30 million South Africans prepare to vote. We report from Nelson Mandela's hometown, where people are forced to drink water from dirty puddles. The Wagatha Christie case is back in court this morning. A specialist judge will decide how much Rebecca Vardy has to pay in legal costs. And the house used in Home Alone goes up for sale for more than $5 million. Morning, everyone. Day 6 of a chaotic election campaign, and the Prime Minister is trying to restore order with a £2.4 billion pensioner tax cut. Conservative campaign headquarters has accused some Tories of not working hard enough. But Government Minister Mel Stride told this programme that Boris Johnson, for one, would be campaigning vigorously. And he wants weekly debates between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Labour's sticking with its core message: it's time for a change. And they say more than 120 business leaders agree with them. In a moment, we'll be live with our correspondents around the country on the campaign trail. But first, here's Mari with more.
The Prime Minister is trying to keep his eye on the ball, but he's struggling with his team. An internal memo has accused MPs of failing to get behind the campaign and knock on doors. Tory Minister Steve Baker was even accused of giving up after jetting off to Greece on holiday. And outgoing MP for Telford, Lucy Allen, was suspended from the Conservatives after backing the rival Reform candidate in her old seat. Today, Rishi Sunak is hoping a promise to raise the tax-free pension allowance via a triple lock plus will get his party back on track.
What happened to some pensioners having to pay income tax on their pensions? Can you guarantee that that won't happen under a Conservative government?
On the basic state pension, that is your form of income. Then under our plans, we will make sure that you are covered by the personal allowance. In other words, you're in that no tax band.
Elsewhere, the Conservatives have accused Keir Starmer of not having the energy to campaign, branding him Sir Sleepy. Perhaps the sight of the Labour leader taking a tea break isn't the best way to rebut that charge, but he called the attack desperate.
When Rishi Sunak says everything's fine, we've turned a corner, that is so disrespectful for people who are struggling. That really means something to me, because I do know what it's like to struggle, and to see people going backwards in life through no fault of their own, that makes me angry.
And this morning, it's Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves in the spotlight with a speech on the economy.
She's promised to lower taxes for working people while also not making public spending cuts. Does she have a magic money tree in her back garden?
It's not a magic money tree, okay, but it is, I think, the question that should be at the heart of this general election. So if you think most people in the UK they know they're paying high taxes, they're the highest by historical standards. They know public services aren't very good. I mean, record NHS waiting lists, schools not opening for the school year because of falling concrete.
How are you going
And
to
the
pay for
reason
it?
for that, and the reason for that is low economic growth. So that's why a speech today from Rachel, setting out the comprehensive set of measures, the Labour plan for growth, which is about stability, yes, but also about industrial strategy.
More than 120 business chiefs have signed a letter backing Labour. But she's also under attack, with a report claiming Labour's tax raid on private schools would force nearly half of fee-paying pupils into the state system. Keir Starmer acknowledges tough decisions will need to be made, but appealing to pensioners could give Sunak the edge over his rivals. Mari Aurora, Sky News.
Well, we have correspondents out on the campaign trail today. Tamara is fighting Labour, Rob is with the Conservatives. Tamara, to you, first of all, Rachel Reeves' speech.
Yes, Rachel Reeves will be here in the East Midlands giving her first major speech of the campaign, and she'll be very pleased with the backdrop to it, which is that 121 business leaders have written a letter to the Times newspaper saying it's time for Labour to have a chance to run the country, saying that there has been over recent years chronic instability, stagnation and lack of long-term focus. These are senior figures in retail, in finance and in manufacturing. And you'll remember that traditionally this is Conservative territory. It's the Conservative Party who tend to get business figures lining up behind their policies at election time. So Labour have worked hard on this. The Shadow Chancellor has been on what's been described as a prawn cocktail offensive over the last few months, trying to win over businesses and say that Labour would not overspend on the credit card if they get into government. Labour have, of course, also tried to present themselves as the party of workers, with an extension of workers' rights, which has been negotiated with the unions. But she will try and use this speech to say that Labour can be both, and to say that if she gets into number 11 Downing Street, she would be the most pro-growth Chancellor in the country's history. And that's really what Labour's plans hinge on. You spoke to Jonathan Reynolds, the Shadow Business Secretary there, about how they would restore living standards to what we've seen in the past, how they would improve public services if they're not going to raise taxes or spend money. And he said there is no magic money tree. It all hinges on growth. And today, Rachel Reeves will be putting out that message to business.
Rob, what are we going to hear from the Conservatives today?
Morning, Kay. I think the focus for the Tories today is on that big pension tax cut announcement. What they are essentially saying they will do is sort of beef up the triple lock. So that's that ratchet mechanism that pushes up the value of the state pension. They want to apply that to the income tax allowance, but only for pensioners. So the amount that you can get coming in before you start paying income tax, they're saying that will now go up by inflation earnings, or 2.5% as well, which means that if you just get your income from the state pension, you will never pay income tax on it. Now, economists pointing out that this is not necessarily all tax cut. This is actually just creating a bit of a carve-out from a planned tax rise. And that is because for everyone else, for people of working age, those allowances will stay frozen. So I think that's why you may hear some questions around generational fairness on this, given that the triple lock is hugely expensive. There'd even been some discussion in recent months about the future of it going forward because of the ballooning cost of it. It has pushed up the state pension by almost 20% in the last couple of years. Clearly, though, the focus here, like with that national service announcement, is on the core Tory vote. So it's this sort of aggressive defence strategy from the Tories, if you like, keeping the Tory core vote on side and stopping leakage to other parties.
OK, for now, thank you. The Israeli Prime Minister insists he won't end Israel's war in Gaza despite global outrage over the deaths of civilians in Rafah. Let's get more, should we, with our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle standing by for us. So more deaths, more civilian deaths, and while a tragedy, we are hearing from Benjamin Netanyahu that he will continue on with his mission.
Yeah, the Israeli Prime Minister, being defiant when he spoke in the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, yesterday. He admitted that what happened in Rafah was a mistake, that the IDF had already come to that conclusion, but he said that there was a technical error, whatever that might mean, but said that they would continue fighting Hamas until they achieved total victory. Now, that, I'm sure, is his opinion and his intent, but you have to say international condemnation of what happened in Rafah was pretty extreme. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, saying he was outraged. Some European governments, including the Belgians, the Italians, the Germans, saying that fighting Rafah must stop. The European Union said to be discussing the potential of sanctions against Israel. So it might be that political pressure on Netanyahu, particularly from Western allies, grows to the point where Israel does need to change course. We'll have to see. For the moment, their main ally, the United States, seems to be somewhat confused over what its position is. They have reacted to the scenes from Rafah, describing them as horrific, but at the same time, they don't seem to think that that strike crossed America's red line on Israeli action in Rafah. The Americans have been very clear that they didn't support a major ground invasion of Rafah, and I think they are sticking to the position that that's not what is happening at the moment. However, as I said, international opinion does seem to be hardening against further Israeli operations in Gaza, and so that might ultimately prove a breaking point.
OK, for now, thank you. Dominating your headlines as well.
Yes, I want to stick with that topic, actually, because Scotland's First Minister is calling on the UK government to immediately recognise a Palestinian state. He wants the next Prime Minister to follow Ireland, Spain and Norway, which will formally recognise Palestine as an independent state later today. Our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, has this report.
Chanting for the freedom of Palestine in what could be Europe's most pro-Palestinian country. Dublin Football Club Bohemians hosting the Palestinian women's team shortly before the Irish government announced today's historic recognition of their country, alongside Spain and Norway.
Some have framed our decision as a move, our decision to recognise the state of Palestine as a move to impose an outcome on the parties, or as somehow a reward for terror. Nothing could be further from the truth.
The Palestinian ambassador to Ireland says it's a momentous day for her people.
This gives hope. This gives them some light out of this dark tunnel. The normal Palestinian people see that we're seen, we're heard by Ireland, by Spain, by the whole world, actually, who protest since the 7th of October. We're not alone in this world. I mean, it's very important.
Israel's response has been one of thinly disguised fury. The country's foreign minister posted this video, Ireland rewarding terrorism. It's a view shared by a former Irish justice minister and prominent member of the Jewish community.
It's about as relevant as New Zealand tomorrow morning announcing that they now recognise that the government of the Republic of Ireland rules the entirety of the island of Ireland. Of course, that wouldn't change reality on the ground. And probably if that did happen, the Irish government would look askance and think everyone in New Zealand has gone mad.
Irish-born Jews say they fear the move could fuel anti-Semitism.
The experience has always been Céad Míle Fáilte. There was an outstretched hand for us and other people. But now we find very simply that that hand is curling into a fist, and we don't know where that is going.
The Palestinian ambassador is now urging the UK to follow Ireland's example.
The British, they have a very strong hand in the injustice that happened to the Palestinians. So I think it's important, one of those countries that should recognise the rights of the Palestinian self-determination is the British government.
The Palestinians hope more Western European nations will follow suit, but Israel sees it not as recognition of a state, but of the actions of a detested terror group.
No more! Israel is a terror state!
Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Dublin.
In other news this morning, the Metropolitan Police has launched a nationwide criminal investigation following the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It will take into account the findings of the public inquiry, which is expected to conclude later this year. Hundreds of sub-postmasters were wrongly convicted after Fujitsu's faulty Horizon IT system made it appear as though money was missing at their branches. France's Transport Minister has warned that strict new EU border controls could lead to operational consequences and civil unrest at airports. The rules will require all non-EU passport holders to have their fingerprints and photo taken when they first arrive in the bloc from October. Both the UK and France have expressed concerns over the measures, which will also apply to those travelling on the Eurostar and also ferries. Pope Francis has been accused of using an offensive term aimed at gay men. Local media are reporting that the Pope made the slur during a private meeting in which he told Italian bishops that gay men shouldn't become priests. The 87-year-old pontiff had been credited with offering a more welcoming approach towards gay people.
Let's talk about Wagatha Christie. You thought it was over, didn't you? But it isn't.
Not over yet. All the money, all the costs still to be sorted, and that happens today. Just to remind you, this was a case that had it all. It had a phone that ended up overboard, lost passwords, secret sleuthing, and 2 footballers' wives. And ultimately, Colleen Rooney ended up victorious. Rebecca Vardy is the one waiting today to find out how much she's going to have to pay. So it all began when Colleen Rooney realised that stories about her private life were ending up in the press, and she had an idea who she thought was behind this, came up with a plan, a sting operation. So she planted fake stories on her private Instagram account, but the key to the success was the changing of the privacy settings. It meant that only one person, her suspect, could actually see those stories. So when they popped up, hey presto, in the Sun, she knew she'd caught the leak. That was Rebecca Vardy, who said she hadn't done it when Colleen Rooney put her suspicions on a social media post that went viral.
She should have left it there.
Yeah, that would have been successful, wouldn't it? It would have, you know, it would have blown over. Instead, it ended up in a whopper of a court case that gripped the nation, at least those who cared about all this stuff.
Everybody did, even if they said they didn't.
Obviously, yes. And the judge ruled that the post ultimately put out by Colleen Rooney was substantially true, and that it was likely that Vardy's assistant had leaked those stories. She's the one who may or may not have slung her phone into the North Sea just after being asked to provide it as evidence. So Rebecca Vardy has been told that she'll face 90% of Colleen Rooney's costs. She's already paid £800,000. This all kicks off in about an hour and a quarter, so at the High Court. These can be pretty dull and dry affairs, I have to say, having been in court for a few of these. So not sure whether we'll see Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy there, but in theory, later we'll find out how much will have to be paid.
Could be another $500,000 or so.
Could be even more than that, I think.
Yeah, let's wait and see for now. Thank you. Tomorrow, South Africa will vote in its most consequential election since the end of apartheid. 30 years after Nelson Mandela led it to power, the African National Congress could lose its dominance. Our Africa correspondent, Yusra Al-Bagir, travelled to the birthplace of the late South African leader and found communities suffering from poverty, hunger and no running water. From there, she sent us this report.
A shrine to the man who led South Africa to freedom. A faded picture of greatness, surrounded by weeds, near the home where he was born. Nelson Mandela's hometown is not exempt from the growing inequality ravaging the country. Here, the decline of his legacy is felt the most. That's Mandela's home, and this is literally his backyard. But the taps are running dry, the crops are withered, and his vision for towns all across the country, like his, just hasn't come to life. And on the doorstep of Mandela's childhood home, where he's now buried, the loss is layered.
Yeah, we feel the freedom when he was still alive, but now everything is not good at all. We are living in poverty and unemployment.
For elders, the memory of the man they know and love still holds strong, fueling a deep loyalty for his party, despite its failure to uphold promises Mandela made.
Mandela promised us houses, and to this day we have not received them. We cannot build houses because our children are unemployed. We also don't work. The welfare grant we get is only enough for food.
Nearby, a mother of 2 washes her children's clothes with the puddle water they're forced to drink.
We drink with cows and pigs. I don't feel happy at all because we are struggling here. Yes.
Villages across the province have no access to running water. collecting what they can from these swamp-like groundwater puddles.
It makes us sick, and my son has a rash because of it, and he always has a running stomach, always.
She's a volunteer at Itemba Kuluntu, a community charity helping families in this village survive a lack of basic services.
How long have the taps been dry?
So it's almost a decade now. This cluster of villages out here outside Port St. John's is really the most forgotten network of rural villages in the country. And this is a systemic human rights violation. This is a major issue that goes back decades, and it needs to be rectified.
It's here in his home province that poverty runs rampant, and his dream for South Africa seems the most distant, where Mandela is buried, but can never truly rest. Yusra al-Bagher, Sky News, Eastern Cape.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. The Metropolitan Police launch a nationwide investigation into the post office scandal, but no charges until at least 2026. We'll be discussing that with a lawyer. And the house used in the Christmas classic Home Alone is up for sale, but for how much? We'll find out next.
Breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Hello again, everybody. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. The Metropolitan Police have launched a nationwide criminal investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. Apparently, 80 officers involved. No prosecutions till 2026, though. Let's speak to Simon Goldberg, senior partner at Simons Muirhead Burton. Hi, it's good to see you. You were there last Friday, for the third and final day of evidence from the former chief executive. What were your thoughts?
It was a very compelling day. one can watch the inquiry on YouTube, and that in itself is interesting, but being there in person was revelatory because you're there in the bear pit. Paula Reynolds was a few metres away, and there were probably dozens, 50 or so sub-postmasters in the room with you, and their sense of outrage, their calm demeanour, but nonetheless watching everything that's going on was palpable. It was very moving, actually, to actually be there, and were you not there in person, you wouldn't have seen that or felt that. And there were gasps and oohs and ahs, and when she was speaking, when she was in flow, and she said something that they didn't like, you could tell much more than if you were watching it at home on YouTube.
What did you make of her evidence? I should say that you represent some of the families.
I do represent some of the sub-postmasters.
Yeah.
I mean, her evidence, looked at clinically from a lawyer's perspective, is that she was very well trained. She's obviously fearful of the consequences that might follow, and lawyers and PR consultants and people have trained her to speak in a certain way. I wasn't really convinced by the evidence, to be honest with you, because the barristers who were cross-examining her found a number of inconsistencies, and they actually, several occasions, she tried to explain something and justify her actions in 2013, 2014, 2015, and the contemporaneous evidence, the emails she wrote at the time, completely flew in the face of that.
You have written to the Lord Chancellor, I believe, Alex Chalk, is that right?
I haven't actually written to the Lord Chancellor. I've spoken about the Lord Chancellor and what I think he ought to do,
Okay.
but I haven't written to him directly.
So what, maybe you will. What should he do?
Yeah, I think that what he should do now is, following really the example of the blood scandal, with the blood scandal, it's taken many decades too long, and I'm not here to talk about that, but there is clarity in the route to compensation, and that is sorely lacking in the Post Office scandal. Considering that this, started in the late 90s, it's really time for them to do exactly the same as what they've done in the criminal prosecutions, which is to overturn them all. And the analogous behaviour in terms of compensation would be to pay meaningful interim, no holds barred, no strings attached payments, so that postmasters and postmistresses and their families, some of whom live still in extreme poverty, can just get on with their lives.
Meantime, the lawyers are doing very well out of all of this.
Sadly, Kay, rather too well for my liking. I'm not going to get too stuck into ethical issues here on your show, but I will say this. It's not the legal profession's finest hour, either for solicitors or for barristers. And there are professional rules that bind us, and some of the solicitors acting for the Post Office seem to have forgotten them. So, for example, if there's a conflict between doing the best you can for the client and what you should do in accordance with your ethical rules, ethics should prevail every time. Unfortunately, a lot of the solicitors' firms and barristers who are acting for the Post Office paid lip service to that and just told the Post Office what they thought management would want to hear.
So what can happen to change that around?
What can happen?
What can happen to change that around? Or are we too far in now? We've spent so much money on lawyers.
Yeah, well, I think that, we're not too far in. I think what can happen is an independent body needs to be set up. At the moment, the Post Office is acting as a judge, jury and executioner. The same old lawyers are still acting for them. And I think what's needed is new room. So an independent body that comes in and dispassionately and objectively looks at what the Post Office has done, looks at loss of earnings and so on for the sub-postmasters and approaches it with a new broom. And the Post Office should also instruct new external lawyers who aren't tainted by what's happened before.
May I ask you what you think will happen to Paula Reynolds?
That's a very difficult question, Kay. There's lots of speculation.
May I ask you what you think should happen?
Thank you. Yes, there's lots of speculation around Paula Reynolds. To some degree, she's become the poster girl of the scandal in all the wrong ways. I don't think that she should be scapegoated, and I think there's a lot more people to blame than just her. What I think, not specifically talking about her, because I think that prosecutors and relevant authorities will look at what should happen to her or shouldn't happen to her. But what I think more broadly is that directors need a boot. Directors need to learn how to run companies properly, and critically, they should be held to account. So more directors disqualified, more rigour of non-executive directors being listened to, that kind of thing. What will happen to Reynolds, it's too tight a call to say, I would say.
And more lawyers should give themselves a long, cold look in the mirror.
I think so. I hope that this is a real wake-up call for my profession. I'm proud and honoured to be a member of the solicitor's profession, and there are many, many wonderful practitioners, not least in my firm. But this needs to be a wake-up call. Solicitors need to feel the sanctions. Some of the Solicitors Regulatory Authority that govern us, they need to get a crack on as well and start to take sanctions against solicitors who have also contributed towards this terrible scandal.
OK, well, let's hope they're listening. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you, Kay.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. A British man among 2 people still missing on Mount Everest will be speaking to a mountain guide about whether anything can be done to make the climb safer. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News Tuesday morning. The weather's terrible.
It is dreek.
We're looking at dreek. Oh, good, as they say in Wigan. Not. Rachel Reeves is in the Midlands, though.
Yes, she is. She's doing a big kind of finance speech at 10 a.m. this morning, and it's all about... Basically, she's going to try and say, we are going to be the party of growth. We are going to be the most kind of pro-growth Treasury if we are to be elected. She's also going to say that we're going to be pro-business and simultaneously pro-worker. And Labour really want to stress that because they're often considered to be, you know, on the worker side of things and, you know, kind of throwing business to the wolves, as it were. And they're really trying to show, no, we can be trusted on both sides. And actually, there is a bit of a symbiotic relationship between business and workers, and they both need each other to succeed and thrive, which is the case. And therefore, therefore they're going to be talking about that. It's also, I've been told, a moment for them to be able to reinforce once again that Labour has changed. It is a changed party. We're going to hear that again and again and again throughout this election campaign. We know they want to drill that message home. And also, realistically, she's going to be trying to kind of show the pitch to the nation as the potential next Chancellor and the kind of Chancellor that she would be.
It was so telling, though, you say pro-worker, that 6-point card that Keir Starmer released with big fanfare, not on that 6-point card, was it? And so now trying to kind of bolster those credentials and reboot that slightly.
But we've got the manifesto coming up, haven't we?
We do have the manifesto coming up.
In about 2 weeks, maybe a bit less? So maybe it'll be in there.
Feature heavily, one would think.
Yeah. But it's interesting how much she is front and centre, as much as Keir Starmer. Whereas, I mean, have we heard anything from Jeremy Hunt during this campaign so far?
Not at all.
I think partly that's because, realistically, the economy has been troubled, let's say, to put it politely. And at the moment, the Conservatives are aware that potentially Jeremy Hunt is still associated with difficult financial times. We haven't had the interest rate cuts that they were maybe hoping they were going to get in time. The inflation figures were good, but not as good as expected. And therefore, maybe they don't want to draw attention too much to that just yet. Let the dust settle. Maybe they'll bring him out later in the campaign.
And instead sell Sunak's time as Chancellor and furlough and supporting the economy, etc., etc.
You get me in trouble. You need to read the headlines.
I need to read that. Yes, Andrew's telling me off. Our top stories this morning. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is promising a tax break for pensioners if his party is re-elected. Meanwhile, as we've just been saying, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will make her pitch to business leaders in her first campaign speech this morning. The Foreign Secretary has said that the Israeli investigation into the attack, which killed 45 people in Rafah, must be swift, comprehensive and transparent. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says something went tragically wrong after airstrikes targeting 2 senior Hamas militants hit a displacement camp. On the day Ireland officially recognises a Palestinian state, the Scottish First Minister is calling on Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer to immediately do the same. And the Metropolitan Police have launched a nationwide investigation into the Post Office Horizon IT scandal. It's understood around 80 detectives are involved, but no charges are expected to be brought until 2026 at the earliest.
Let me tell you about a British man. He's among 2 people still missing after a landslide of snow and ice on Mount Everest. Dan Peterson's disappearance follows claims of overcrowding on the world's highest peak. So let's bring in Lucas Furtenbach. He's a guide for those taking on Mount Everest. He joins us now from Innsbruck in Austria. Hi, Lucas. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time. So much to talk about here. Let's talk first about the missing climber and his Sherpa. What do you think happened?
I have been on the mountain on the summit day, 1 day behind them. So I have not been on spot when this accident happened. But what reports say is that these 2 climbers were not clipped in with their safety carabiners into the fixed line. And when this cornice on the summit ridge collapsed, probably because there have been too many people at the same place, they were just falling down the east face of Everest, the so-called Kangchung face, to the Chinese side, which is a couple of thousand meters. And other people that have been on the place of the location of the accident have been hanging in the rope because they have been clipped onto the rope with their safety carabiners.
What hope is there that Dan and his guide, Pastenji, may still be found alive?
I have to admit, I can't imagine that they can still be found alive after this amount of days. I think it would even be hard to locate them at all because the Tibetan side of the mountain is very hard accessible. There's no possibility for commercial helicopter flights. The airspace is closed from China. It's only military aircraft allowed. The whole area on the east side of Everest is, as I said, is almost impossible to access from Nepal. And I think the face is just the dimension of the face is so big that it will be hard to locate them. At the bottom of this ice and snow face are big crevasses. And everything that falls down from the southeast ridge, this Kangchung face, will be sooner or later be falling into one of these big crevasses. So I think it will be hard to locate the persons or the bodies at least.
Yeah, Lucas, we're looking at some images, and we've seen previous photographs as well, of course, illustrating just how overcrowded it is at Everest. What can be done about that?
I think if we compare Everest to other mountains in the world that are often climbed, like the Matterhorn or Mont Blanc or Denali in the US or Aconcagua, we can't speak about overcrowding on Everest. This season, 570 people have summited Everest. On Mont Blanc in France, a good year, about 30,000 people summit Mont Blanc. So we can't speak about real overcrowding or mass tourism on Everest. But what definitely has to be done is a form of visitor management. Like you have to give teams certain slots, that we don't have this situation where many teams go for the summit on the same day and then these crowds on the summit ridge form.
What's the appeal of Everest, Lucas?
It's the highest mountain on the planet, and it has a high appeal. It has a lot of history. It has a lot of drama. We can see after every season of drama, the attraction of Everest becomes even higher. And I think it's the combination of it. It is dangerous. It has a lot of history, and it is the highest point on this planet, and this makes the whole appeal of or the attraction of this climb.
On the ceiling of the world, with nothing between you and whatever else is up there.
Exactly.
How many times have you climbed it?
Only 4 times. So,
only 4?
Yeah.
Only 4. And will you do a 5th?
Probably yes. I work on Everest, and every year we have these expeditions there, and so it's a fundamental part of my life. And what we try is to make this climb safer, and there are possibilities to make this climb safer. And I think that many of the accidents that are happening on Everest just in recent years, like last year, the record year with 17 people dying on Everest, or this year we hold at 9 in the meantime, because one more Indian guy died today or yesterday. I think most of them could have been avoided with a new set of regulations.
And is it to respect the mountain, to respect the weather, or both?
I think it's both, and also it's to respect and to follow minimum safety standards and protocols for the guide companies and operators that are working on Everest and taking clients up there, because it is still one of the most dangerous places on this planet. And there will never be 100% safety up there. But with the right regulations and protocols in place, I think many of these accidents can be avoided.
OK. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
From an expert in mountains to an expert in politics, Sam is standing by for us, waiting to hear from Rachel Reeves, who would like to be the next Chancellor.
That's right, Kay. Here we are in the dry. The entire Labour campaign juggernaut has alighted on this business in Derby, where in about 20 minutes' time, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, will be making her pitch to become the Chancellor. Now, this is effectively Labour's business launch. It comes off the back of a letter to the Times last night, where 120 present and largely past business leaders endorsed the plan for growth from the Labour Party. There are pretty memorable names, pretty well-known household names on that list: JP Morgan, Heathrow, Aston Martin, JD Sports, and the advertising giant WPP. The Labour Party have been working for a long time trying to get much closer to business in order to be able to deliver a letter like this at this moment. And in the speech that Rachel Reeves will give in about 20 minutes' time, she's going to say, look, this letter is proof that we have changed as a party compared to, for instance, 2019, when Jeremy Corbyn, who was famously not that business-friendly, was leading the Labour Party. Questions from the Tories include, why aren't there any current FTSE 100 executives signing up to that letter. You know, it's a tricky thing to do, but they would have tried, and there were some back in 1997. But I think Labour quite pleased, particularly to get this all on the front page of the Times, when the Tories also have their announcement today about additional help, £2.4 billion additional help for pensioners, helping them through the tax system. But just at the moment, Labour, which isn't going to match that promise, thinking that their pro-business credentials are the loudest thing that they need to shout about today.
Should we take the opportunity to mention that politics at Jack and Sam's is going daily for the duration of the election?
We definitely should do that. We're going to be recording every day. It's everything you need to know about the campaign day ahead in British politics. We're going to be doing all the work for you, so in just 10 to 12 minutes, you're going to find out everything you need to know about the day ahead. We're very excited to be going 5 days a week.
I'm going to have it on speed dial. Thanks very much indeed, Sam. Get in there and then you don't miss a word. Thank you. Wilf joining us now. Hi, Wilf. We didn't get the chance for you to ask the question that everybody's asked me about that promo you talked about for our election coverage. Did the boys know that I was going to go in and crash into their studio?
Well, did they?
No. No, they didn't.
Mean, what I did understand is that it was filmed all in one take very quickly during one of their ad breaks, which to me just says do it live, cut the scripts and do it live, because I thought it was absolutely fantastic the way it came together. I enjoyed you taking Roy Keane. I hadn't seen that latest bit. I don't know if there's a new part of it, which might mean there's even more still to come, but taking Roy Keane's star off the wall as well.
We weren't sure how he was going to react, Wilf, so we did it when he wasn't there.
Yeah, well, good choice. He's really blossomed as a broadcaster, I think. Fantastic stuff. It was a great promo. I've said that before. I really did think it was absolutely fantastic, and it made me just can't wait for the coverage as we get closer. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ed Conway does with all of those tricks as well. What I will just say is, Sam, get into the auditorium there so he doesn't miss a moment of the Rachel Reeves speech. Our viewers won't miss a moment of it either. We're looking forward to that coming up at the top of the hour on Sky News today. We'll be talking to Lee Anderson later as well, following Nigel Farage's announcement due in around the same time, and actually the Prime Minister due to give a pool interview as well at about 10 or 11. So lots to come in those first couple of hours of Sky News today. We will have all of it, and I just think the really interesting thing, and we'll see what happens in the weeks to come of the election campaign, is the way that Labour's clearly broadening things out a little bit to include some of Starmer's top team, Reeves, today at 10 a.m, whereas the focus continues for the Tories to be really on one man, on the Prime Minister. We'll see if there's more of a team approach that emerges from the Tory campaign in the days and weeks ahead. Haven't really seen it yet, have we?
No. Andy Burnham, Greater Manchester Mayor, of course. Let's see what role he plays on election night. He's going to be with us in the studio with Ruth Davidson as well. I showed my son a sneak peek of that promo, and I said, and he saw the star throwing, and he said, "Yeah, you're OK, Mum, but Roy Keane's a legend."
Well, he is a legend, but I'm hoping and guessing your son's an Arsenal fan like you are?
He is, yeah.
He is. It was a shame Merce wasn't there. But, you know, to be fair, I have no complaints on the promo. The promo was 10 out of 10. I mean, if Wenger or Henry or Merce or someone had made a brief appearance too, fantastic. But you nailed it.
OK, here it comes again.
The end of this gripping Premier League season, making it 7 straight wins.
When's Kay coming in?
I think they're going to kick off when she gets here.
You think of their defenders, you think of Carlos just over 6 foot away.
And our match commentators.
Right, let's see what this election studio's all about then.
Lost the crowd.
Hiya. All right, mate.
How are you, Kay?
I'm good.
Sorry?
Come on, we've not got all night. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Don't say no to this one.
Is this a prank? Is that Beatles about or something?
Yeah.
Kay's about?
Look, Ed's already measuring up the screens.
Well, this is fantastic. We can have maps there, charts there, and more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in.
Where's Sophie?
Enough Fergie time. Time for election time, I think you're fine. You can both... This is my studio.
We're gone as well?
Gone.
Oh, God.
See ya.
You're fired? Oh,
I'm not joking.
To be fair, I've always wanted to take you on live, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all mouth.
Yeah, I reckon we can work with this.
This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
Nice to meet you.
You too, my darling. I'm coming this way first.
Oh, yeah, she knows. You're going there first.
See ya, thanks.
Much better.
I wish I was surprised, but unfortunately I'm not. But whilst that sounds very scary, 21,000 people will be diagnosed with melanoma, I think it's important to say two things. First of all, if it's caught early, around 9 out of 10 people will survive 10 years after a melanoma diagnosis. Catching it early is key. But also, 17,000 of those 21,000 could be prevented. And whilst early treatment is brilliant and we've got more and new and interesting and innovative treatments for even late-stage melanoma, if you could avoid getting it in the first place, that would be better for everybody. It is vital that we stay out of the sun in the hottest hours between about 11 and 3, that you wear a good high-factor SPF of at least 30, and you need to check the star rating on the back, and that star rating needs to be 4 or 5. And that means you're protected against UVA and UVB. Pop on a hat. You know, these are the things that make a difference. People who we don't necessarily put sun cream on their heads, they should do, but everybody needs to wear a hat. So sun protection is key, and avoiding sunbeds. People often worry, and they worry, for example, about, oh, if I put on sun cream, I'm not going to get enough vitamin D. And research from Australia shows very clearly that we don't put on enough sun cream and we don't reapply it often enough. People are definitely getting their vitamin D. You need to be using about 2 fingers worth on just your face and neck, 2 fingers worth on your arms, 2 fingers worth on your upper legs, 2 fingers worth on your lower legs. And actually that's about a shot glass of cream to cover your whole body every couple of hours. And if you're in the water, as soon as you get out of the water as well. There are 3 kinds of skin cancer, and melanoma is the kind that comes from moles. And we use the ABCDE rule. So A stands for asymmetry. Generally, moles are broadly symmetrical. You could fold the 2 halves together. And if it looks like one bit is growing off in a different direction, it's not symmetrical anymore. That's something to see your doctor about. The borders should be nice and smooth. That's the B. If one becomes a little bit raggedy, go to the doctor. C is for colour, that you need to have less than 2 colours. And if you do have 2 colours, that again, that they're symmetrical. D, if it's under about 6 millimetres, then we tend not to worry. And E, and here's the most important one, evolving. If your mole is changing, get it checked. And with regards to the other kind of skin cancers, if you have a sore or a scaly patch or a lesion that is different and isn't getting better, go and get that checked out.
Hello again, everybody. Watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Our team will be with us in just a second. Before that, though, let's see what Ian King thinks about the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who'll be making a speech in the East Midlands momentarily. What do you think the city want to hear from her, Ian? Good morning.
Hello, Kate. Well, I mean, as I was speaking last week to Dame Amanda Blanc, Chief Executive of Aviva, the UK's biggest life insurer, essentially what big businesses in the city in particular want to hear is just stability and clarity over policy. They don't want the sort of sudden lurches of policy that we've had in recent years. That's really all business leaders ask for is, as I say, some level of predictability in terms of government policy. And obviously under Boris Johnson and then latterly Liz Truss, policy did lurch and career around all over the place. Now, certainly under Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, things have become more stable. There's more stability in government policy, in particularly around the public finances. And I think business people essentially want more of the same. If you look back at how businesses have responded to past general election campaigns, and it's very, very topical in view of this open letter that's been published by business leaders today endorsing Labour. Well, essentially, it's always been the same thing all along. It's always been consistency of policy, consistency of an approach that is pro-business. One key reason why Labour lost business backing back in 2010 when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister was because not only had he introduced a new top rate of income tax of 50p in the pound, he'd also announced plans to raise both employer and employee national insurance. And that was very easily dressed up by David Cameron and George Osborne at the time as being a measure that destroyed destroyed jobs, and accordingly it was very easy for the Conservative opposition at that time to muster a lot of big business names in favour of keeping the status quo and not going ahead with that tax increase. So essentially what Labour have done very successfully over the last few years under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves is not frighten the horses. They haven't really pointed to the kind of anti-business policies that one saw, for example, under Jeremy Corbyn, or even before that, Ed Miliband, to an extent. It's, as I say, it's all about clarity and consistency. And when Labour leaders get that right, business people will come out and support them. The most famous example, obviously, was in 1997 when Tony Blair had absolutely stacks of endorsements from very big business names. It has to be said, some of the names on this letter today aren't quite of that calibre, but nonetheless, it shows, I think, how Labour have changed.
Ian King live from 11:30, already looking forward to it. Thank you, Ian. 4:30 as well, as I should say, of course. Do you think I can get away with trying to convince you again that I haven't seen Home Alone?
No, you've been
Absolutely
rumbled
not.
now.
I know, but I mean...
Self-rumbled.
Exactly. Have you seen Home Alone? It's like this. How much do you think that house is worth?
Oh, maybe 5 million, maybe.
Because it says on the auto cue.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I remember from last hour.
Yes, indeed. It has been full. I would have thought it'd be more than that, to be fair.
Depends where it is, I suppose. If that was in central London, it'd definitely be more than that.
The lighting job's good.
Yes, it's been fully renovated, apparently. It's got a basketball court, I'm told, and I think it's got a swimming pool. Oh, a cinema.
Which is
as
apt,
well.
isn't it?
Do you think they might show Home Alone too? Yeah.
You would hope so. Now, everyone else goes and bakes a loaf of bread and puts some flowers and coffee on, but they'll just have Home Alone 2 looping around.
There you
and
go.
it's a sales pitch.
That could be a good sales pitch. You could literally host Home Alone screenings in the Home Alone house, sell tickets.
That's what he just said. That's what he just
said. Is that what you just said?
Roughly what I was alluding to.
Oh, whoops. I thought you were talking about something else. Totally misunderstood you there, Gareth.
Coffee I was going to brew. I'll brew you a cup as well.
You. And there are 4 Home Alones, apparently. I learned today. There we go. I've only seen one. One too many. You're watching The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. That's it from us for today. We are back at the same time tomorrow. Rachel Reeves coming your way momentarily. And Wilf will talk you through that. And also we set Sam to listen to what she has to say in the actual room. More tomorrow. See you then.